wheels turning, but nothing moves.
I don't have the strength. Not today.
Not today, not tomorrow, not right now, not next week.
It's just a low. I'll get out of it.
This is apathy. Unapologetically, which I appreciate. I can practically taste your soul dying in this dingy place. Get up. Get up.
I can't.
You will die here.
Unless you move.
You will die here.
Part 1. Hello everyone, this is Glenn Matsuri once again. I realize I didn't properly introduce myself the last time when I shared my account of the Piper, which you can find in the description below. For that experience, I wrote everything after the fact, neatly tying together the threads of a story that had already ended. But what I am about to share with you now is different. While it's all over now, what you're about to hear began as my account in real time, as it happened. After my confirmation with the cult of Moloch and the strange peace I found in its wake, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. The world is not what it seems. I saw firsthand how thin the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary truly is. I learned how deep and tangled the roots of the unknown could grow. And once you've seen those things, you can't look away. That experience changed me. It haunted me, yes, but it also ignited something. A need to understand, to dig deeper, to uncover what else might be hidden in the shadows. So, I've set out once again, driven by that same curiosity and perhaps a need for answers I'll never truly find. This story isn't about the Piper. It's about something else entirely. Something that lives in the spaces we think we control, but never really do. This is my account of what I've found. I spent days searching, chasing shadows and whispers, and every lead dissolved into nothing. The world felt smaller than it should, its mysteries shriveling under my scrutiny. Forums buzzed with nonsense. Blogs recycled the same tired tales of haunting cryptids and rituals. Nothing had teeth. Nothing was real. Frustration gnawed at me. Hours spent staring at my screen, poring over meaningless threads. Each dead end fed a creeping doubt. Had my experience with the Piper and Moloch been some cruel anomaly? Was I chasing something that no longer wanted to be found? It was during one of these aimless afternoons, sitting in a coffee shop, that I finally stumbled across something. Or maybe it stumbled across me. I wasn't paying attention at first. My focus blurred by caffeine and exhaustion, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a girl sitting a few tables away. She had a laptop in front of her, a cup of tea untouched beside it. Nothing unusual, really, at least not at first glance. But something about her stillness caught my attention. She wasn't typing or scrolling. Her hands rested flat on the table, her eyes locked on the screen. I tried to brush it off. People get lost in their devices all the time. But the longer I watched her, the more unsettled I felt. Her face was expressionless, her breathing slow and shallow, as if she wasn't entirely there. Instinct took over. I stood, pretending to stretch, and casually moved closer to her table. She didn't look up, didn't react at all, her eyes glued to the screen. The screen. I tilted my head slightly, catching a glimpse. At first I thought it was just a website, but the longer I looked, the more wrong I felt. The background was pale, almost white, and the text, if you could call it that, that wasn't in any language I recognized. Jagged, angular symbols scrolled endlessly, shifting into patterns that made my eyes ache. There was a faint hum, so soft I almost didn't notice it, pressing at the edges of my hearing. A low, static buzz that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The girl's hands twitched slightly, her fingers brushing the table, her breathing hitched for a moment, then steadied again. But she didn't look away. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, a deep, instinctual sense of wrongness. I didn't stay long. I didn't comfort her or ask questions. I just left, my mind racing. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, and maybe she was just zoned out, hypnotized by some weird video or obscure internet project, but the feeling stuck with me, that whisper of static at the back of my skull. And then, I started seeing it again. It wasn't everywhere, not all the time, but it was enough. A man sitting on a park bench, staring at his phone with that same vacant expression, his screen glowing faintly with the same jagged symbols. A teenager on the subway, their laptop balanced on their knees, their fingers motionless on the keyboard. A woman in a grocery store, standing frozen in the middle of an aisle, her phone dangling loosely in her hand. Every time, the same stillness, the same hollow gaze, the same faint, suffocating hum that I could feel more than hear. It wasn't just my imagination. Something was happening, and I had to know what. The more I saw these people, the more obsessed I became. They weren't hard to find if I paid attention. Those glazed-over stares, the unnerving stillness. But what unsettled me most was that they didn't completely withdraw from the world. They still interacted with it, in their own way. A man in the park stood up, eventually shuffling to a nearby trash can to throw away a soda can, and then returns to his bench. A teenager on the subway snapped their laptop shut when their stop came and exited with the crowd, moving with a mechanical rhythm. The woman at the grocery store eventually left her aisle and checked out, scanning her items with an eerie precision. It was like they were running on autopilot, performing the basic functions of life with just enough coherence to pass as normal. But they weren't normal. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. Something vital was missing, like their spark had been snuffed out. Eventually, I decided I couldn't just watch anymore. I had to talk to one of them. She was sitting outside a coffee shop, her laptop open on the table, the same glazed look on her face. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, twitching slightly, but never pressing a key. I could hear the faint hum again, that static pressure clawing up the back of my skull. I hesitated, unsure how to approach her. But then, I forced myself to take a deep breath and walk over. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice light. She didn't respond. I stepped closer. "Hey, are you okay?" This time, she moved. Slowly, almost reluctantly. Her head turned toward me. Her eyes met mine, and I felt a chill run through me. They were blank. No curiosity, no irritation, no recognition. Just a dull, empty gaze. "I'm fine," she said, her voice flat and mechanical. Her answer wasn't what unsettled me. It was how she said it. There was no inflection, no emotion, like she was reading from a script. "What are you working on?" I asked, gesturing toward her laptop. She blinked, her expression not changing. "It's a project." "What kind of project?" "A personal one." The responses were clipped, vague, like she was deflecting without even trying to. I glanced down at her screen and saw the same strange symbols scrolling across it. My heart pounded in my chest. "Can I see?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. "No." Her hands moved slightly, shielding the laptop from my view. For the first time, there was something in her tone, an edge of resistance, though it was faint. "Please?" I pressed. It looks interesting." She hesitated, her gaze flickering back to the screen. Her fingers twitched again, and then, to my surprise, she nodded. "Okay." She turns the laptop toward me, and the symbols on the screen seemed to pulse faintly, shifting faster now that I was looking at them. My eyes ached and the hum grew louder, buzzing in my skull. "What is this?" I asked. "A sight," she said simply. "What's it called?" Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she said it, her voice barely a whisper. "WireWeave." WireWeave. The name felt cold and sharp, like something that didn't belong in my mouth. "Where did you find it?" I asked, but she didn't respond. Her gaze drifted back to the screen, her blank stare returning. "Hey," I said, louder this time. She flinched slightly, as if I'd startled her. Then she turned the laptop away from me, her fingers brushing the keyboard with mechanical precision. "I have to go," she said, her voice hollow again. Before I could say anything else, she closed the laptop, stood up, and walked away, her movements slow but deliberate. I didn't follow her. My mind was too busy reeling from what I'd just seen and heard. WireWeave. Whatever was happening to these people, whatever was pulling them into that hollow, glazed state, it was connected to that site. And now I had a name. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of my computer screen. The only sounds were the hum of the fan and the occasional creak of the old wooden desk beneath my elbows. The city outside was quiet, muffled by the hour, leaving me alone with the unsettling silence that always seemed to creep in when I was at my most vulnerable. The name WireWeave echoed in my mind as I typed it into the search bar. My fingers hesitated over the keys, a faint tremor running through them. I couldn't explain why, but I felt as though I was about to open a door I couldn't close. The first search results were useless. Generic tech blogs and knitting tutorials, even some links to outdated forum posts, nothing remotely related to what I was looking for. I refined the search, adding terms like symbols, glazed, unusual website. Still, nothing. Frustration mounted as the hours dragged on. I scrolled through endless pages, my eyes burning from the glow of the screen. The silence around me grew heavier, more oppressive, and the faint buzz at the back of my skull, so subtle at first, started to grow louder. And then I found it. It wasn't the site itself, not yet. It was an obscure blog post buried deep in a forgotten corner of the internet. The page was dated years ago, the formatting crude and broken as though it hadn't been touched in decades. The title read, "Nama's Paradise, a False Eden." I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I clicked the link. The post was rambling, fragmented, but one thing was clear. The author claimed to have encountered someone, or something, called Nama. She was described as a being of extraordinary beauty and malice, offering an escape, a paradise, to those she touched. But it wasn't real. It was a trap, a cage built from wires and chains where the mind was ensnared and the soul consumed. The author warned against searching for her, against following the whispers of her promise. But the post ended with a single, chilling line. "If you've come this far, it's already too late. You know the name of her paradise. WireWeave." My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled further. And there it was. A link. No description, no explanation. Just a simple blue hyperlink glowing faintly on the screen. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to close the tab and walk away. But the buzz in my skull was louder now, insistent, almost alive. It felt like something was pushing me forward, urging me to click. And I did. The screen went black for a moment, then loaded into a stark, minimalistic website. The background was pale, almost white, and in the center of the screen was a single line of text. "Welcome to Paradise." Beneath it, symbols began to scroll across the page, jagged, angular, shifting constantly, just as I'd seen before. The hum in my head surged, sharp and relentless, as if the symbols themselves were drifting into my mind. I couldn't look away. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't type. The cursor blinked steadily in the empty search bar at the top, waiting for input, but my hands refused to move. The buzz grew louder. It wasn't just in my head anymore. It was everywhere. In the air, in the walls, vibrating to the floor beneath my feet. The symbols pulsed, faster now, the screen flickering slightly as though something was trying to break through. And then, I felt it. A pull. It wasn't physical, not exactly, but it was undeniable, like an invisible thread tugging at the back of my mind, pulling me closer to the screen. My vision blurred, the symbols on the page stretching and twisting into impossible shapes. I tried to move, to push the chair back, to tear my eyes away, but my body wouldn't respond. The buzz in my skull reached a deafening crescendo, and the screen seemed to expand, the pale background bleeding out into the edges of my vision. I was falling. The world around me, the desk, the room, the hum of the fan, all dissolved into static. And then there was nothing. The first thing I felt was wet. Not just damp, wet, gooey, slick, and clinging to my skin like some horrible second layer. My body was submerged, floating in a thick, viscous liquid that coated every inch of me. The sensation was suffocating, and when I tried to move, I couldn't. My arms and legs were stuck, my movements sluggish and weak, as if the liquid itself resisted me. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I did. The world around me was blurred, hazy, and strangely pixelated. Shapes shimmered at the edges of my vision, jagged and incomplete, as if they were struggling to take form. I blinked again, and slowly the details began to emerge. I was in a cave. The walls were jagged and dark, dripping with moisture. The air was thick and heavy with an unsettling, almost metallic tang. Around me, massive clusters of spider eggs clung to the walls and floor, the translucent shells pulsating faintly with an eerie glow. And then I saw the vat. I wasn't just submerged. I was trapped in a large, gooey vat at the center of the cave, surrounded by dozens of others. Most were empty, their viscous contents pooled on the ground, but a few held strange, shadowy forms, figures that seemed human but flickered and glitched as though struggling to stay solid. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. Panic surged as I thrashed against the substance holding me in place. It was sticky and resistant, like some kind of organic glue, and every movement felt like it was dragging me deeper into its grip. My breath came in short, panicked gasps, and I realized I wasn't breathing air. It was something else, something thick and wrong. And then the rendering began. The cave seemed to ripple, the edges of the walls shimmering as if I were looking at them through heat waves. Textures slid into place, details sharpening and solidifying. The faint hum I'd heard in my apartment was louder now, vibrating through my body as the world snapped into focus piece by piece. I wasn't just in the computer. I was part of it. I don't know how long I was stuck there, unable to move. The reality of my situation sinking in like cold water. The eggs around me pulsed, their faint glow growing brighter, casting flickering shadows across the cave walls. I was on the verge of giving up when I heard footsteps. They were faint at first, echoing from somewhere beyond the vat. Then they grew louder, more purposeful. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man, tall and broad, with a rough, unkempt beard and sharp eyes that darted around the cave like he was searching for something. He was clad in a mix of leather and what looked like salvaged metal armor, and he carried a rusted sword at his side. Behind him, a woman followed, her her movements graceful and deliberate. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid, and she wore a cloak that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Her eyes locked onto mine as she stepped closer, and I saw a flicker of recognition in her expression. "Another one," she said softly. The man, Gregory, as I would later learn, approached the vat and studied me with a critical eye.
He's stuck. Looks fresh.
"Get him out," the woman, Tiana, replied, her voice calm but insistent. Gregory grunted, drawing a knife from his belt. He plunged it into the goo, slicing into the sticky substance with practiced precision. I felt the tension around me loosen as the liquid began to drain, spilling onto the ground with a sickening squelch. "Breathe," Gregory said, as he hauled me out, his grip firm but not rough.
"It'll feel like hell for a minute, but you'll adjust."
He wasn't wrong. The first breath I took felt like fire in my lungs, and I doubled over, coughing and gasping. The air tasted strange, metallic and synthetic, but it was breathable.
"Where?"
I croaked, my voice raw.
"Where am I?"
Tiana crouched beside me, her gaze steady and unflinching. "Welcome to paradise," she said, the faintest hint of sarcasm in her voice. It took time to collect myself, to stand on shaky legs and process what they told me.
"We're inside it,"
Gregory explained, gesturing vaguely to the cave around us.
"The website, WireWeave. When you went too deep, it pulled you in. Same thing happened to us."
"How long?" I started, but Gregory shook his head.
"Don't ask," he said. "Time doesn't work right here. Could have been days, could have been years."
I looked at Tiana, hoping for something more concrete, but she only nodded. "What about our bodies?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop myself. "The people I've seen outside, they're still walking around, still there. How is that possible?" Tiana frowned, her expression darkening. "The bodies stay behind. They keep moving, keep functioning, but they're not them anymore. They're shells, puppets." "Puppets for who?" "For her," Tiana said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Nama. She takes the soul, the essence, and leaves the rest behind to spread her influence. The more people she takes, the stronger she gets." Tiana leaned against the wall, her arms crossed. "And now, you're part of it too. Congratulations." The weight of their words settled on me like a stone. I wasn't just trapped. I was part of something far larger, far darker than I'd ever imagined. And I had no idea how to escape. The cave felt alive, and not in a comforting way. Every sound, every drip of moisture, every faint skitter echoed through the oppressive darkness like a warning. The faint glow from the pulsating eggs scattered across the walls did nothing to ease the tension. If anything, it made the shadows seem darker, shifting and stretching like they had a life of their own.
"Quiet,"
Gregory hissed, glancing back at me as he sheathed his blade.
"She'll hear us."
"She?" I whispered, barely able to make my voice work. Tiana glanced at me, her face tight. "Mama Webster, the one who keeps this place in order. She doesn't like intrusions." My stomach twisted. "Mama Webster?" Gregory nodded grimly.
"Giant spider. Biggest thing you've ever seen. Smart, too. She patrols the vats, makes sure new arrivals stay put until it's time for..."
He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "For what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Until she drags them away," Tiana said, her voice low. "Where she takes them, we don't know, but they don't come back." I swallowed hard, the sticky residue still clinging to my skin, making me feel claustrophobic. "And you were checking the vats for me?"
"We don't like leaving people behind," Gregory said. "Not if we can help it. Most of them..."
He paused, grimacing.
"Most of them don't make it out. But every now and then, someone like you pops up. Someone worth saving."
"Well, don't thank us yet," Tiana muttered, glancing around the cave. "We're still in her nest." Gregory motioned for us to follow.
"Stay close, move quiet," Don't look at the eggs too long. They'll, move if you stare.
My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to follow, my bare feet squelching against the damp floor. The air was thick and stifling, filled with an unnatural heaviness that made every breath feel like a struggle. We moved in silence, weaving through the narrow passages between clusters of glowing eggs. The goo on the floor clung to everything, making every step a gamble. The faint hum I'd felt in my skull earlier was still there, growing sharper, like a distant swarm of bees.
Why does she patrol?
I whispered, unable to shake the feeling that eyes were watching us from the dark.
She's a guard,
Tiana said without looking back.
for this place, for Nama. And Nama,
My voice faltered.
she controls her. More like uses her,
Gregory said, his voice bitter.
Mama Webster's part of the system, same as us. But she's different, bigger, meaner, and she doesn't have a problem following orders.
Quiet! Tiana snapped suddenly, holding up a hand. We froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Somewhere in the distance, I heard it. A soft, wet, skittering sound, like legs dragging through muck. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer, echoing off the walls.
Back.
Gregory mouthed, gesturing to a crevice in the cave wall. We pressed ourselves into the shadows, the space barely large enough to hold the three of us. My breath caught as the skittering grew deafening, accompanied by a faint clicking sound, rhythmic and sharp.
And then I saw her.
She emerged from the darkness, a massive, hulking shape that barely fit in the tunnel. Her legs were long and spindly, each one coated in the same viscous goo that filled the vats. Her body was bulbous, pulsating faintly with the same glow as the eggs. But it was her face, her eyes, that made my blood run cold. 8 glossy black orbs dotted her head, but they weren't lifeless. They darted back and forth, scanning the room with an unnatural intelligence. Her mandibles clicked rhythmically as she dragged her enormous body forward, her legs scraping against the walls. My chest tightened as I realized she wasn't just patrolling. She was searching.
Don't move,
Tiana whispered, her voice barely audible. Mama Webster stopped near the vats, her massive head swiveling as she inspected them. One of her legs reached out, tapping the edge of an empty vat with a soft, deliberate motion. The sound echoed in the silence, a rhythmic tap, tap, tap that made my skin crawl. Gregory's hand gripped my shoulder, steadying me as I trembled. The spider paused, her head cocking slightly as if listening. I held my breath, my heart thundering in my chest. She lingered for what felt like an eternity, before finally moving on, her massive body disappearing into the shadows with a final, wet scrape. We stayed frozen for several long moments, the silence around us almost as suffocating as her presence had been.
She's gone,
Gregory whispered, finally, his voice slow and tense.
Let's move.
The rest of the escape was a blur of tension and exhaustion. Every shadow felt like a return, every sound a warning of her approach. When we finally emerged into the open air, the sharp coldness hit me like a slap. I collapsed onto the damp ground, gasping for breath. Gregory and Tiana stood nearby, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit.
Congratulations,
Gregory said dryly, sheathing his knife.
You survived Mama Webster's nest. That's more than most can say.
But we're not safe yet, Tiana said, her voice sharp. We need to keep moving. She doesn't leave the cave, but this world has other predators. I sat up, the weight of their words sinking in. My mind was spinning, trying to process what I'd just seen, what I'd just survived. I looked around, and despite everything, the terror of the cave, the impossible reality of this digital prison, I couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the land. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light over the forest. Trees towered above us, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating the forest floor in patches of warm glow. Birds chirped in the distance, their songs intertwining with the faint rustle of leaves. A river wound its way through the valley below, glimmering like liquid silver in the morning light. It was hard to believe that something so serene could exist in the same world as the horrors we'd just escaped.
Keep moving,
Gregory said, his voice breaking through my thoughts.
Don't let the view distract you. This place may look beautiful, but it's still a trap.
Tiana nodded, her eyes scanning the road ahead. The forest has its own dangers. Keep your guard up. We followed a dirt path that wound its way through the trees, the ground soft and damp beneath our boots. The forest felt alive, almost too alive, as if the world itself was watching us. As we rounded a bend, I spotted 3 figures walking toward us, 2 women and a child. One of the women caught my eye immediately. She was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Her features were sharp and feline, her ears pointed and covered in soft fur, her pupils slitted like a cat's. Her tail swayed lazily behind her as she walked. She wore a patchwork cloak over leather armor, her bare feet padding softly on the dirt road. The other woman looked more human, though her clothing was just as worn and travel-stained. She carried a small pack on her back and a wooden staff in one hand. The child clung to her side, their wide eyes darting between us as we approached. The feline woman raised a hand in greeting, her lips curling into a sharp smile.
"Good morning, travelers,"
she said, her voice thick with an accent I couldn't place.
"You look weary. Perhaps you would like to trade."
I hesitated, glancing at Gregory and Tiana.
"Go ahead,"
Tiana whispered, leaning closer to me.
"They're NPCs, for lack of a better term."
"NPCs?" I whispered back.
"Non-playable characters,"
she said, her voice barely audible.
"They're not like us. They're part of the system, part of this world. I think of them as scripted. They'll follow certain behaviors, say certain things, but they're not real, not like we are."
Despite her words, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were real. The feline woman's gaze was sharp, intelligent. The child clinging to the human woman looked nervous, uncertain, like they were truly afraid.
"Do you need anything?"
the feline woman asked, her head tilting slightly. Her accent was melodic, rolling off her tongue in a way that was both foreign and familiar. I began, unsure of what to say.
"We don't have anything to trade,"
Gregory said, stepping forward. His tone was curt, dismissive, but the feline woman didn't seem offended.
"Pity,"
she said, her tail flicking behind her.
"Safe travels, then. Watch the road ahead. Not all who walk it are friendly."
With that, the 3 of them continued down the path, their footsteps fading into the distance.
"NPCs,"
I murmured again, still trying to wrap my head around it. They seemed alive.
"They're not,"
Tiana said, her tone flat.
"They're part of the trap. This world is built to feel real, to keep you here. The NPCs are just another layer of the illusion. Don't let it fool you."
But as I watched the child glance back at us one last time before disappearing into the forest, I couldn't help but wonder if she was wrong. The road wound deeper into the forest, the sunlight dimming as the canopy thickened overhead. The soft chirping of birds faded, replaced by an eerie stillness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Every so often, I caught movements in the corner of my eye, a branch swaying without wind, a shadow darting across the path. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. We walked in silence, each of us on edge, until the trees parted to reveal a clearing. At its center stood a manor. It was enormous, a sprawling structure of stone and dark wood that loomed over the surrounding forest. Ivy crept up its walls, and intricate carvings adorned the beams and columns. Despite its grandeur, there was something unsettling about it. The windows, tall and narrow, reflected the forest like dark, watching eyes. The air here was heavy, thick with a smell of damp earth and something faintly metallic.
"I didn't think we'd be stopping here,"
Tiana muttered, her voice tense.
Gregory shrugged. "Figured it'd be worth a try."
As we approached, something darted across the path ahead of us. It was a squirrel, or at least it was trying to be. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, its limbs twitching erratically as it climbed a nearby tree.
What the hell?
I whispered, watching it scamper upward in stuttering bursts. Its fur was patchy, its body almost translucent in places, as if the rendering process hadn't quite finished. Tiana grimaced.
Bugged, she said. It happens. The system isn't perfect.
The squirrel paused on a branch, turning to look at us. Its eyes were flat, black, and far too large for its face. It tilted its head, then let out a high-pitched screech that sounded distorted, as though the sound were coming from a broken speaker.
Let's keep moving, Gregory said, his tone sharp.
We climbed the stone steps to the manor's front door, an ornate piece of carved wood that looked as though it belonged to a royal palace. Gregory knocked, the sound echoing ominously. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, the door creaked open, revealing a woman. She was stunning, easily the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Her features were delicate, her skin flawless, her hair a cascade of silvery gold that shimmered in the dim light. But what struck me the most were her ears. Long and pointed, they swept back elegantly, marking her as something otherworldly.
Good afternoon,
she said, her voice soft and melodic.
How can I help you?
Gregory stepped forward.
Is Henry in?
The woman nodded, her smile warm.
Henry's in the study. Please come in.
She stepped aside, gesturing for us to enter. The entry hallway was grand, its high ceilings and polished floors gleaming in the faint light filtering through stained glass windows. The walls were lined with tapestries depicting scenes of battle and celebration, though the figures were subtly wrong. Arms too long, faces blurred, poses stiff. A chandelier hung overhead, its crystals casting fractured rainbows across the room. We stood there, waiting as the woman disappeared deeper into the house.
Who's Henry?
I asked, keeping my voice low.
Another one of us, Tiana said. He's been here a long time. Decades, maybe. He gave up on escaping a long time ago.
What do you mean? Gregory leaned against the wall, crossing his arms.
Henry decided if we can't get out, we might as well make the best of it. Built this place himself, married an NPC, even had a kid. The whole happy family package.
I blinked, struggling to process that.
He married an NPC? Had kids? How does it even work?
Tiana shrugged.
The system lets you do it. The NPCs respond to him like they're real. And the kids...
She trailed off, frowning.
They're not exactly normal, but they're his, in a way.
Despite everything, Gregory added,
Henry can be counted on. He knows this world better than anyone. If we need help, he'll give it.
I glanced around the entry hall, my unease growing. The grandeur of this place didn't match the twisted world outside. It felt too perfect, too polished, like the system was trying too hard to make it seem real. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, growing louder as someone approached.
Brace yourself,
Gregory said, his tone neutral.
Henry's unique.
The man who stepped into the room was Henry. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a warm, easy smile and an air of confidence that seemed entirely out of place in a world like this. His clothes were immaculate, a finely tailored vest over a crisp shirt, and his hair was neatly combed. Behind him trailed 7 children, all of them eerily well-behaved. They ranged in age from a toddling boy clutching a stuffed rabbit to an elegant young woman who couldn't have been much younger than me. They filed into the room with perfect poise, their expressions cheerful and welcome.
Welcome, Henry said, his voice deep and friendly. It's always a pleasure to see new faces. Please, make yourselves at home.
He shook Gregory's hand with an ease that suggested long familiarity.
Good to see you again, Gregory and Tiana.
They nodded, polite but stiff. I could see it in their faces. Something about this place, about Henry, made them uneasy.
Thank you for letting us stay,
Gregory said, his tone careful. Henry waved him off.
Nonsense. You're always welcome here. Besides, it's not often we get new guests.
He turned to me, his smile warm and genuine.
And you must be Glenn. Don't worry,
You're in good hands now. We'll take care of you.
His children chimed in one by one, introducing themselves with practiced ease. Their names were quaint, old-fashioned. Maple, Thistle, Ivy, Ash, Rowan, Fern, and Little Alder. The older ones smiled politely, while the younger ones giggled and clung to their father's leg. They were normal. I mean, that was the only way to describe them. Perfectly, disarmingly normal. And that was the unsettling part. I couldn't understand why it didn't bother me, why their normalcy didn't set my nerves on edge the way it clearly did for Gregory and Tiana. Gregory shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight, while Tiana's gaze darted from one child to the next as if she were expecting something to break the illusion. "We'll stay for the night," Gregory said after a long pause, "if that's not too much trouble." "Of course," Henry said, clapping him on the back. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like. We have plenty of room, plenty of food. You're safe here." Safe. The word hung in the air like a promise too good to be true. Henry turns to me, his smile never wavering. "You look like you could use a bath and some fresh clothes, my friend. It's been a long journey, hasn't it?" It was only then that I noticed how filthy I was. My clothes were ragged, stained with mud and the goo from the vat. That my skin felt grimy, my hair matted. I must have looked like I'd crawled out of the earth itself. Yeah, I could use that, I admitted, suddenly self-conscious. "Maple," Henry said, turning to his oldest daughter, "would you help Glenn get settled?" She stepped forward with a smile that was as warm and disarming as her father's. Maple was just as beautiful as her mother, her features delicate and flawless, her long golden hair shimmering as she moved, and her presence was magnetic. "Of course," she said. "Follow me, Glenn." The bath was in a grand, tiled room that felt like it belonged in a palace. The tub was enormous, carved with smooth stone, with steaming water that smelled faintly of lavender. Maple moved around the room with an effortless grace, gathering towels and soaps as I stood there, awkward and out of place. "You'll feel better after this," she said, glancing at me with a knowing smile. "It's amazing how much a bath can change your perspective." She handed me a towel, her fingers brushing mine for just a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes lingered on me, and her smile widened. "How old are you?" I asked, trying to fill the silence. 19, she said, her tone light. I stared at her, trying to do the math. 19 years. Henry had been here long enough to not only give up on escaping, but to build a life, to raise a family. Oh, that's incredible, I said, struggling to find the words. She laughed softly, a sound that was both innocent and alluring. "It's just life, Glenn. You'll see. The world isn't so bad once you get used to it. There's beauty here, comfort." She stepped closer, her gaze locked with mine. "It's not so lonely." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how isolated I felt until that moment, how much I missed the simple connection of another person. She was beautiful, kind, warm, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to believe her. I smiled back, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. That's when it hit me. This was the snare, the hook. Her warmth, her beauty, her kindness. It wasn't just natural. It was designed, calculated. She wasn't just offering me comfort. She was offering me exactly what I wanted, what I needed. I froze, my smile fading as the realization sank in. Her gaze didn't waver, but I thought I saw something in her eyes. Something sharp, almost predatory. "Maple," I said, carefully, stepping back. "Thank you. I think I can take it from here." Her smile stayed, but the warmth in her eyes flickered, replaced by something else, something cold. "Of course," she said, her voice still honey-sweet. "Enjoy your bath." She left the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I stood there, staring at the steaming water, the weight of my loneliness pressing down on me. I didn't know what scared me more, how close I'd come to falling for it, or how much I still wanted to. Part 2. After the bath, I felt like a new person. The grime and stickiness of the cave were gone, replaced by the clean, almost silky feel of my skin. My hair was washed, my muscles finally relaxed, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt human again. The clothes Henry provided were a revelation. A soft linen shirt, sturdy trousers, and boots that felt like they had been crafted specifically for me. Even the belt was finally made, with a gleaming buckle that caught the light, although with the clothes came some unexpected equipment. A leather satchel, a small dagger, and a pair of gloves lined with faintly glowing thread. Henry had thought of everything. "You clean up nicely," Maple said when she saw me. Her voice was light, teasing, and she gave me a smile that was warm enough to make my chest tighten. I nodded awkwardly, still uneasy around her. "Thanks. The clothes, they're great." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment longer before she turned and gestured for me to follow. "Dinner's ready. Father's waiting." The dining room was magnificent. A long, polished table stretched almost the entire length of the room, lined with high-backed chairs that gleamed in the flickering candlelight. The walls were adorned with tapestries and paintings, each one depicting scenes that felt both familiar and alien. Battles, celebrations, landscapes that seemed too perfect to exist. And then there were the butlers. Ash, one of Henry's younger sons, called them foxes, and he wasn't wrong. They were literal foxes, walking upright on their hind legs, wearing perfectly tailored tuxedos. Their movements were unnervingly precise as they carried silver trays, poured wine, and placed dishes on the table with practiced ease. One of them stood in the corner, strumming a lute with delicate paws, while another sang in a hauntingly beautiful voice. It was surreal, and yet none of Henry's family seemed to think twice about it. "They take good care of the household," Henry said, and he gestured for us to sit. "They're more reliable than any human servant I've ever had." Gregory and Tiana exchanged a glance, their unease palpable. I could see it in the way Gregory's jaw tightened, the way Tiana's eyes darted around the room as if she were trying to find the cracks in the perfect veneer. For me, though, the sight was almost mesmerizing. The foxes moved with such grace and care, their manners impeccable. One poured me a glass of something that smelled faintly of apples and cinnamon, bowing politely as he stepped away. "Please, enjoy," Henry said as the food was served. "It's not every day we have company." The meals were a feast. Roasted meats, fresh bread, steaming vegetables, and a variety of sauces and side dishes that looked almost too beautiful to eat. The smells were intoxicating, and my stomach growled loudly as I sat down. Henry sat at the head of the table, with Gregory and Tiana on one side and me on the other. Maple took the seat beside me, her presence impossible to ignore. "So," Henry began, leaning back in his chair with a relaxed smile, "what brings you to my little corner of paradise? It's been a while since I've seen you two." "Passing by," Gregory said, his tone curt but not unfriendly. "We've been keeping busy." "Busy doing what?" Henry asked, his smile never faltering. "Looking for answers," Tiana said, her voice flat. Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "Still chasing the dream, are you? I told you, there are no answers, only choices, and I made mine a long time ago." "You've certainly settled in," Gregory said, his eyes scanning the room. Henry laughed, a deep, hearty sound. "Why fight it? This world has its quirks, sure, but it's better than whatever we left behind. You'd be surprised how much peace you can find when you stop struggling." The whole time, Maple sat beside me, her presence magnetic. She didn't say much, but her occasional glances, the way her arm brushed against mine, the faint, knowing smile she gave me, it was a constant distraction. "You seem quiet, Glenn," she said softly, leaning closer. "Does the food not suit you?" "It's amazing," I said, my voice slightly hoarse. "I'm just taking it all in." Her smile widened, and I could feel the warmth of her gaze. "You'll get used to it. This world has a way of growing on you."
Her words lingered in my mind as the conversation continued. Gregory and Tiana exchanged barbs with Henry, their tension growing more apparent, but Maple's presence kept pulling me back. It wasn't just her beauty, it was something deeper, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She seems to know exactly what to say, what to do to keep me hooked, to make me feel noticed, desired. And that's when it hit me again. This was the snare. The comfort, the beauty, the warmth, it was all designed to trap me, to make me forget the outside world and accept this one. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to focus on the conversation, but Maple's gaze stayed on me, her temptation like a weight I couldn't shake. Dinner was in full swing when the sound of bells cut through the air. At first, they were faint, almost melodic. They chimed irregularly, like the echo of a song half forgotten. I thought I might be imagining it, the remnants of some distant memory bleeding into this surreal world. But then, I saw the others stiffen. Henry's jovial demeanor shifted slightly. His hand paused mid-reach for a glass of wine. Gregory and Tiana exchanged a glance, their faces tense. Even the children, who had been chattering happily moments before, grew quiet, their eyes darting toward the window. The bells grew closer, louder. Their chime lost its melody, warping into something discordant and unsettling. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as the sound seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the manor.
What is that?
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No one answered. Henry stood, his expression unreadable. The fox butlers froze mid-step, their precise movements halted, as if waiting for a command. The bells were louder now, echoing just outside the walls. And then, thunder rolled across the sky. The sound was deep and heavy, rattling the windows and shaking the floor beneath our feet. It wasn't the sharp crack of a lightning storm. It was slower, heavier, as though something vast and ancient were shifting above us. "We should go outside," Henry said, his voice calm but firm.
"Do we have to?"
Tiana muttered, but she rose with the rest of us, her hand resting uneasily on the hilt of her dagger. The children stayed behind, watching silently as we moved to the grand's double doors. The fox butlers swung them open with a flourish, revealing the darkened forest beyond. The bells were louder outside, their chiming distorted by the oppressive atmosphere. The night was unusually dark, the moon and stars obscured by a thick, swirling sky. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time, and the sound seemed to carry a weight that pressed against my chest. And then, through the trees, I saw movement. A reindeer emerged from the shadows, its antlers glistening faintly as though coated in frost. It moved slowly, its hooves crunching softly against the dirt path. On its back was a saddle, and sitting in that saddle was something. As it came closer, the figure resolved itself. A small man. No, a gnome. He was barely 3 feet tall, his body wrapped in a patchwork cloak that seemed too large for him. His face was lined and weathered, his beard short and scruffy, and he wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his sharp, piercing eyes. He pulled the reins gently, bringing the reindeer to a halt a few yards from the manor. The bells, I realized, were tied to the saddle, their chimes softening as the gnome dismounted with surprising grace. He looked up at us, grinning.
"There's a storm coming,"
he said, his voice rough but oddly cheerful.
"Figured I'd stop by and see what's for dinner."
Henry laughed, his tension breaking like a dam.
"Skeeb, you old bastard, you scared us."
Tiana rolled her eyes, though a faint smile played on her lips.
"You could have announced yourself, you know. Where's the fun in that?"
The gnome shot back, his grin widening. Everyone seemed at ease, but I stood there, bewildered. "Skeeb?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "What kind of name is that?" The gnome turned his sharp eyes on me, his grin fading slightly.
"I'm like you, ass-face, trapped here."
I blinked, taken aback.
"I didn't mean to... What do I what?"
He interrupted, his voice dripping with impatience.
"Talk like this, look like this. Hell if I know. It's just how I showed up here."
"And the name?" I pressed. He shrugged, turning his attention to the reindeer as he unhooked the bells. Gregory spoke up, his tone dry. It's the only name he's ever given. Take it or leave it. I frowned, studying the gnome. His face lined and weathered, making him look like he was in his mid-50s. But something about him didn't fit the image of an old man. How old are you? I asked, unable to resist. Skeeb turns to me, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. I'm 12. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 12? I echoed incredulously. Yeah, he said, smirking. Been here long enough to outgrow whatever the hell I was supposed to be. But yeah, 12. You had a problem with that? I shook my head, my mind reeling. This place was stranger than I'd ever imagined, and Skeeb was living proof of just how twisted it could be. Come on, Henry said, clapping his hands together. Dinner's still warm. Let's eat before the storm hits. As we turned to head back inside, Skeeb gave me a sharp pat on the arm, his grin returning. Relax, kid. You'll get used to it. Or you won't. Either way, you'll live. I wasn't so sure about that. As we walked back into the manor, the firelight from inside casting long shadows across the polished floor, I found myself falling into step with Skeeb. His small boots clicked on the stone as he chattered away, full of energy. For someone who looked like he was in his mid-50s, he carried himself with a strange, almost childlike enthusiasm. To add to that, he didn't shut up. So, I began, still trying to process everything he'd said earlier. You've been here 3 years? Yeah, he said, grinning up at me. 3 whole years. And let me tell you, it's been wild. Way better than the boring old real world. I glanced at him, studying his lined face and scruffy beard. No offense, but you don't look like someone who's only been here 3 years. You look older. A lot older. He chuckled, his grin widening. Yeah, I get that a lot. But I mean, come on. Doesn't it make sense? I'm a gnome. Gnomes are supposed to be old and wise and stuff, right? So, boom. Here I am. Small, wrinkly, badass. You're just guessing, aren't you? I said, narrowing my eyes. He stopped for a moment, his expression faltering. Okay, fine. Yeah, maybe I am, but think about it. When I got here, I was 9. Nobody's gonna take a little kid seriously, right? So, the world, or whatever runs it, must have decided I needed to be this. He gestured to himself, dramatically, as if presenting an award. 9, I repeated, the number catching me off guard. You were 9 when you ended up here. Yeah, he said, starting to walk again. Pretty crazy, huh? 1 second I'm screwed around online, and the next thing I know, bam, gnome life. And now you're 12, I said, frowning. Exactly. He flashed me a grin. 3 years here, though honestly sometimes it feels longer, you know? Like I've done so much, it's hard to believe it's only been 3 years. I nodded, still processing his words. Do you really think it's been 3 years? Or do you think time moves differently here? Faster, maybe? He stopped again, turning to face me. His grin faded suddenly, replaced by a thoughtful expression that made him look even older. I don't know, he admitted. I've thought about it a lot. I mean, how would we even know, right? We're in here, the rules are different. But does it matter? Yeah, I said, after a moment. I think it does. He laughed again, the thoughtful moment vanishing as quickly as it had come. You're overthinking it, dude. Anyway, it's not so bad. I mean, I got my own stronghold, my own brigands. I'm practically a legend. I raised an eyebrow. A stronghold? Hell yeah, he said, puffing out his chest. Big old forest up in the mountains. Got a bunch of guys working for me. We run the roads, take what we need, total warlord vibes. I stared at him incredulously. You're saying you're a warlord? Yep, he said, grinning like it was the most obvious thing in the world. What, you don't believe me? Go check it out sometime. The brigands practically worship me. It's awesome. I was about to call him out, to point out how absurd the whole thing sounded, but then we re-entered the dining hall. The warm glow of the firelight filled the room, and the scene inside was eerily perfect. Araya, Henry's wife, moved gracefully around the table, guiding the children back to their seats. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, her voice soft and melodic as she spoke to each of them. Skeeb hopped onto a chair without hesitation, grabbing a piece of bread from a silver tray and leaning backward with a smug grin. "Anyway," he continued, speaking louder now that we were back in the group, "being a warlord's great. You wouldn't believe how much power I got. And the brigands, they're loyal as hell. Do whatever I say." I glanced around, expecting someone to laugh, to challenge his claims, but no one did. Henry chuckled, shaking his head fondly. "Skeeb, always the adventurer. It's good to see you again, my friend." Gregory and Tiana exchanged a glance, but said nothing. Even Aurea, who was busy settling the younger children, didn't seem to find his words unusual. I sat down, slowly, trying to wrap my head around it. "Wait, you're not going to question him?" I whispered to Gregory. Gregory shrugged, his face unreadable. "Doesn't matter if it's true. Here, perception's everything. If he believes it, if the system believes it, then it's real enough." I looked back at Skeeb, who was now enthusiastically describing his latest raid on a caravan. His crude language and exaggerated gestures made him seem like a child pretending to be something bigger than himself. But in this world, where rules bent and reality shifted, maybe that was all it took. And that was a thought I didn't know how to feel about. The storm outside grew louder as we resumed dinner. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the occasional crack of thunder. Rain began to patter against the windows, a soothing rhythm that contrasted sharply with the tension lingering in the room. The Fox butlers continued their work, moving with their unnerving precision. One poured wine for Aurea, who sat beside Henry, while another stood in the corner, plucking a haunting tune on the lute. For a moment, I tried to let the atmosphere relax me, to focus on the food in front of me, but the unease never quite left. Gregory leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze fixed on Henry. "I've been following a lead," he began, his voice low and steady. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Oh, something worthwhile?" "Could be," Gregory replied. He glanced briefly at Tiana, who nodded slightly before he continued. "Julie took a group to Namaz Palace a few weeks ago. They haven't returned." Henry's expression darkened, his usual jovial demeanor fading. "And you think that's a good thing?" Gregory nodded. "Their bodies were never brought back to Mama Webster. If they failed, that's where they would have ended up. But the vats are empty. No sign of them." "Which means what?" I asked, cutting into the conversation. Gregory turned his sharp gaze to me. "It means they might have found a way out." A heavy silence fell over the table, broken only by the sound of the storm outside. Tiana shifted in her seat, her fingers drumming lightly against the edge of the table. "It's a long shot," she admitted, "but it's the only one we've got." Henry leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Julie's group, they were ambitious, sure. But Namaz Palace isn't just some stroll to the woods. It's the heart of this place. The rules are different. They're worse. If they made it, it'd be a miracle. Miracles happen," Gregory said firmly. Henry gave him a pointed look. "Not here." I glanced between them, trying to piece together the implications of what they were saying. "So, Namaz Palace, that's where she is?" "If you believe the stories," Tiana said. "It's her domain, her throne, or whatever you want to call it. Supposedly it's where she draws her power, where she keeps her secrets." "And her captives," Gregory added. A chill ran through me at his words. "And you think Julie's group made it out?" I asked. "I think they might have found something," Gregory said. "A path, a weakness, something we can use." Henry sighed, rubbing his temples. "Gregory, I respect your determination, I really do, but chasing this lead could just as easily get you killed. And for what? A slim chance at freedom. For some of us, that's enough," Gregory said. The tension in the room was palpable. Even the children, who had been quietly eating, seemed to sense it. Their chatter had faded, replaced by the soft clinking of silverware against plates. Skeeb, for once, was silent, his sharp eyes darting between Gregory and Henry as if watching a game of chess. Henry finally shook his head, his expression softening. "You know I won't stop you, but just be careful, Gregory. You've seen what happens to people who go too far. I know the risks," Gregory said. The storm rumbled again, the sound rolling through the manor like a warning. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all standing on the edge of something far greater than any of us understood. Gregory leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table.
So, Henry, will you come with us?
The room went still. The storm outside seemed to pause for a moment, the thunder rumbling faintly in the distance like it was waiting for his response. Henry's expression, usually so warm and jovial, darkened. His easygoing demeanor cracked, and for the first time I saw a spark of anger in his eyes.
"What's the point?"
he said, his voice low and sharp. Gregory blinked, taken aback.
"What do you mean, what's the point? You've been here as long as any of us. Don't you want to get out?"
Henry laughed bitterly, leaning back in his chair.
"Get out? And go where? Back to the real world? To what I left behind? You think that's some grand prize waiting for me out there?"
Gregory opened his mouth to respond, but Henry cut him off, his voice rising.
"This is real, Gregory. This."
He gestured around the room, his hand sweeping over the table, the children, the fox butler standing at attention.
"It feels real, doesn't it? The food, the warmth, the people. It's better than anything I've ever had out there." "What are you talking about?"
Gregory asked, his tone sharper now. Henry's jaw tightened, and he looked away for a moment, his eyes fixed on the flickering fire in the hearth.
"You think I had some great life before this? I didn't. I came from nothing. A terrible home, a terrible life, parents who hated each other, who hated me. I barely got by, and then I end up here in a world that actually makes sense."
He turned back to Gregory, his voice softer but still edging with anger.
"I built this, Gregory. This manor, this family. It's mine. It's good. And if it feels real, then why isn't it real? Why do you and Tiana insist on throwing it all away for some pipe dream?"
The words hung heavy in the air. Even the fox butlers seemed to pause, their movements slowing as though they were caught in the tension of the moment. Tiana broke the silence, her voice calm but firm. "Because it's not real, Henry. It's a trap. You know that."
Henry laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "If it's a trap, then it's the nicest trap I've ever been in. Look at this place. It's a paradise compared to what we left behind." "You just convinced yourself of that," Gregory shot back. "You're comfortable here, so you've stopped fighting. But it's still a cage, Henry. A gilded cage, sure, but a cage all the same."
Henry's fist slammed down on the table, making the silverware clatter.
"And what if I don't care, huh? What if I've decided that this is enough? Not everyone has something worth going back to, Gregory. Some of us are better off staying right here."
The room fell silent again, the storm outside picking up, as if echoing the tension inside. I sat, frozen in my seat, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Henry's words were like a punch to the gut. His anger, his pain, it was raw, undeniable. For all his charm and warmth, it was clear he'd been carrying this weight for a long time. Gregory leaned back, his expression unreadable.
"Fine,"
he said quietly.
"If that's how you feel, I won't push you. But if Julie's group found something, I'm gonna see it through. And if there's even the slightest chance of escape, I'm taking it."
Henry didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. The rest of us sat in tense silence, the storm's thunder rumbling louder, as if the world itself was unsettled by the conversation. For the first time since arriving in this strange place, I began to understand just how deep the cracks ran, and just how hard it would be to hold on to myself in a world like this. The heavy tension in the room was broken by Maple's soft voice. "Father," she said, her tone calm and sweet, "may I show our guests to their rooms?" Henry exhaled, running a hand through his hair.
"Yes," he said after a moment. "Go ahead, Maple."
She stood gracefully and gestured for us to follow. "Come, I'll make sure you're all comfortable." We rose from the table, the storm still murmuring outside as we left the dining hall. The manor was quieter now, the fox butlers moving silently as they tended to their tasks. The children had long since gone to their rooms, leaving the corridors dimly lit by flickering sconces. As we moved through the halls, I noticed that Maple led Gregory and Tiana to a single room. I raised an eyebrow at the sight. They hadn't mentioned being together, but seeing them share a room, it made sense. This world was hard and isolating. Maybe they'd found comfort in each other. Skeeb, ironically, was given the largest room of all, complete with a grand 4-poster bed and a fireplace that crackled warmly. He grinned as he stepped inside, muttering something about how it fit his vibe. Finally, it was my turn. Maple led me down a quiet hallway, stopping in front of a door next to a large, intricately carved wooden arch.
That's the library,
She said softly, nodding toward the arch.
and this is your room.
She opened the door and stepped inside with me, her movements fluid and deliberate. The room was simple yet elegant, with a soft bed draped in warm blankets and a small table by the window overlooking the forest. Maple lingered, her presence filling the space in a way I couldn't quite describe. She turns to me, her gaze steady and warm.
Do you like it?
It's nice, I said, suddenly aware of how small my voice sounded. She stepped closer, her hands clasped in front of her.
You seem tense, Glenn.
I hesitated. It's just a lot to take in. This place, your father, everything. Her lips curved into a soft smile, and she reached out, her fingers brushing against my arm. Her touch was warm, almost electric, and I felt a shiver run through me.
You don't have to be strong all the time,
She said, her voice gentle.
Not here, not tonight.
Her words cut straight to the core of me. The loneliness, the weight of everything I'd been carrying, it all seemed to bubble to the surface. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Maple stepped even closer, her hands resting lightly on my chest. Her eyes met mine, and there was something in them, something knowing, something that saw every part of me.
You don't have to be alone, Glenn.
She whispered.
Not tonight.
Henry's words echoed in my mind. If it feels real, why isn't it real? I didn't have an answer. The warmth of Maple's hands, the softness of her voice, it all felt so real, so right in that moment. I gave in. Her touch was intoxicating, and as the night went on, it was as if she drained every ounce of loneliness from me. That aching, hollow part of me, the part that had screamed for connection, it was gone. But so was something else. I felt lighter, freer, almost euphoric, but it was a strange, hollow kind of bliss, like I'd lost a part of myself. Not a good part, maybe, but a part of me, nonetheless. As I lay there, the storm rumbling faintly in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder what even was real anymore. I awoke to the sound of shouting. It ripped me from a deep, dreamless sleep, and for a moment I was disoriented. The world around me was too vivid, too sharp. The warmth of the blankets, the soft glow of morning light filtering through the curtains, it all felt surreal. Then the crash came. Steel against wood, splintering loudly, followed by heavy, deliberate footsteps. The door to my room exploded inward, the frame shattering as two hulking figures stormed inside. Orcs, massive, brutish creatures clanging in jagged red armor, their tusked faces twisted in snarls. Up! One of them barked, his voice guttural and commanding. I barely had time to move before one of them grabbed me, yanking me from the bed with a force that made my head spin. My arms were wrenched behind me, and I felt the rough bite of rope as they bound my wrists tightly. "What's going on?" I stammered, struggling against their grip. The orc didn't answer. Instead, he shoved me forward, out into the hallway, where chaos unfolded. The shouts echoed throughout the manor, blending with the clang of metal and the heavy thud of boots on the wooden floors. Tiana and Gregory were ahead of me, similarly bound, their faces tense but determined. Henry was there too, his expression grim, his shoulders slumped in a way that made him look smaller than he was. But something was wrong. As we were dragged through the halls, I couldn't help but notice the eerie stillness in the air. The Fox butlers were nowhere to be seen. Neither were Henry's children. Instead, there was blood. It streaked the walls and pooled on the floors, the once pristine manor now smeared with crimson. The sight of it made my stomach twist, and I couldn't bring myself to ask the question burning in my mind. Where was Henry's family? We were hauled outside into the cold morning air, the storm from the night before leaving the ground damp and muddy. The orcs moved with brutal efficiency, shoving us into a circle at the center of the courtyard. I stumbled, falling to my knees as one of them barked and ordered. Gregory and Tiana were beside me, their faces hard with defiance. Mabel knelt on Henry's other side, her once graceful demeanor shattered, her eyes wide with fear. And Henry looked broken. He didn't fight, didn't resist as they forced him to his knees. His head hung low, his expression hollow, his hands trembling slightly against the ropes binding his wrists. The orcs stood around us in a ring, their weapons glinting in the morning light, their armor splattered with blood. And then they parted. A figure emerged from their ranks, small and familiar, striding forward with an air of confidence that turned my confusion into cold dread. Skeeb. But this wasn't the Skeeb I'd met last night. Gone was the scrappy gnome in the patchwork cloak. He was clad in jagged red armor that matched the orcs, the plates clinking softly as he moved. A sword hung at his hip, and his once cheerful face was now a mask of smug triumph. "Sorry, Henry," he said, his voice loud and cutting, "but you've got a lot of loot. In this house, it's too nice not to be mine." Henry didn't respond. His shoulders sagged further, his defeat palpable. I stared at Skeeb, my mind reeling. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Skeeb smirked, tilting his head as he looked at me. "What does it look like, ass-face? A takeover. Gotta climb the ladder somehow, and Henry here is sitting on prime real estate." "Skeeb, you little..." Gregory began, but an orc cut him off with a sharp shove, sending him sprawling into the mud. "Careful," Skeeb said, wagging his finger at Gregory. "Don't make me regret keeping you alive." I couldn't wrap my head around it. Skeeb, the loudmouth, arrogant gnome who'd been joking and eating with us just hours ago, was now orchestrating this. "This isn't a game," I said, glaring at him. "Sure it is," Skeeb replied, his grin widening. "And I'm winning." He turns to Henry, his expression softening in a way that was almost mocking. "Don't take it personally, Henry. You've had your time, but you know how it is. Big fish, little fish, circle of life, all that crap." Henry finally lifted his head, his eyes meeting Skeeb's. "Hey, you don't understand what you've done," he said quietly, his voice heavy with something deeper than anger. "Oh, I understand perfectly," Skeeb shot back. "I've done what nobody else had the balls to do. You got soft, Henry, and I'm here to fix that." I glanced at Maple, her face pale, her eyes filled with terror. For the first time since arriving in this world, I realized just how fragile this supposed paradise really was, and just how dangerous Skeeb could be. Skeeb circled us like a predator, surveying his triumph, his small frame carrying an air of exaggerated authority as he addressed his captive audience. "See, here's the deal," he began, his tone smug. "You lot, you're the perfect tribute. Nama's gonna love this. 3 of her enemies." He paused, his gaze falling on me, his grin widening. "Whatever the hell you are." I glared at him, my anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I held my tongue. "Nama's been good to me," Skeeb continued, pacing in front of us. "Real good. You think this armor just happens? You think these orcs just follow me for fun? Nah, she rewards loyalty, power. And with you all as my offering, I'm gonna get a seat at the big table." "You don't even know what you're doing," Tiana hissed, her voice sharp. "Shut up," Skeeb snapped, pointing a gloved finger at her. "You don't get to talk, Miss High and Mighty. You'll see soon enough." Then Henry spoke. "Nalma's gonna chew you up and spit you out, kid," he said, his voice low and steady, though his eyes burned with anger. "You think you're climbing the ladder, but you're just another pawn. You'll never be more than a scared little boy playing dress-up." The insult struck Skeeb like a physical blow. His confident smirk faltered, replaced by a scowl. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Henry said, his voice gaining strength.
You're pathetic. Always were, always will be. A child pretending to be a king.
Skeeb's face twisted in anger as he stormed up to Henry, his small frame dwarfed by the man's bulk.
You think you're better than me? Huh? Sitting in your fancy house pretending you've got it all figured out. Newsflash, Henry, you lost. You're nothing. Nothing.
Henry chuckled, a bitter, humorless sound.
Says the gnome throwing a tantrum because he can't handle a few words.
Skeeb's face turned red, his composure cracking.
Shut your mouth, old man.
Henry leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper.
Oh, what, Skeeb? You gonna cry about it?
The insult struck deep, and for a moment, Skeeb looked genuinely shaken. Then, as if to prove himself, he stepped closer, his face inches from Henry's. And Henry spit in his face. The courtyard fell deathly silent. Skeeb stood frozen for a moment, his hand wiping the spit from his cheeks, his expression twisted into something feral, a mix of humiliation and unbridled rage.
You son of a...
Before he could finish, one of the orcs stepped forward, picking up a hammer from a nearby workbench. The weight of the movement hit me all at once, my breath catching in my throat as I realized what was about to happen.
Wait, I shouted,
struggling against the ropes binding my wrists.
Don't! But it was too late.
Out of respect for Henry, I won't describe what happened next. The orc moved with brutal efficiency, his expression unreadable as he brought the hammer down. The sound echoed through the courtyard, a sickening finality that left us all stunned. When it was over, Henry lay lifeless on the ground, his body still and broken. For a moment, even Skeeb seemed shocked, staring down at the man who had dared to defy him. But then, as if to reassert his dominance, he began yelling insults at the corpse.
Yeah, that's what you get, he shouted, his voice cracking with anger. You think you could talk to me like that? You think you're so much better? Look at you now, Henry. Look at you.
Maple let out a choked sob beside me, and I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Gregory and Tiana sat silent and rigid, their expressions masks of fury and grief. And me, I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. The storm rumbled overhead, the rain starting to fall again as if the world itself mourned the loss of Henry. Skeeb strutted around the circle like a peacock, chest puffed out, his jagged armor clinking softly as he moved. The smug grin on his face was unbearable, the satisfaction in his eyes a cruel reminder of the horror we had just witnessed. He wiped his hands together as though brushing off dirt, then turns to the orcs, his voice sharp and commanding.
All right, boys, get him ready to move. Nama's waiting, and I don't want to keep her waiting too long.
The orcs grunted in unison, stepping closer to us with rough hands and heavy footsteps. One grabbed Gregory by the shoulder, shoving him upright, while another yanked Tiana to her feet. Skeeb's gaze roamed over us like a predator inspecting its prey until her eyes landed on Maple. He tilted his head slightly, his expression twisting into something colder, crueler.
Get rid of this one, he said, his tone dismissive, as if he were throwing out garbage. Maple froze, her face paling.
What?
She whispered, her voice trembling.
Skeeb smirked, gesturing lazily toward her.
Nama doesn't care about...
He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as if savoring the words.
Locals.
Maple's breath hitched as she looked desperately to Henry's lifeless form, then to me, her eyes pleading.
No, I said,
struggling against the ropes binding my wrists.
No, you don't have to do this. She hasn't done anything.
Skeeb turns to me, his grin widening.
Oh, relax, Glenn. It's nothing personal. She's just, not part of the package, you know? Nama only wants players, not some random little NPC clinging to daddy's coattails. She's not an NPC, I snapped, my anger boiling over. She's what? Skeeb interrupted, his voice mocking. Your girlfriend. Please. You've known her for all of, what, a day? Don't get so attached, buddy. It's just how the game works. One of the orcs grabbed Maple by the arm, pulling her roughly to her feet.
She struggled, her movements frantic, her voice breaking as she begged.
No, please,
Stop! I shouted, my voice cracking as I tried to lunge forward. The ropes bit into my skin, holding me in place as the orcs dragged her away. Gregory and Tiana were silent, their faces dark and unreadable, their hands clenched into fists.
Come on, let's move,
Skeeb said, clapping his hands as if they were all just a routine.
We've got places to be, and Nama's got tribute to collect.
As Maple's cries faded into the distance, I felt a pit open in my stomach, a hollow, gnawing emptiness that made the world around me feel suddenly colder, crueler. And Skeeb, he just kept grinning, like he was already imagining the rewards waiting for him at Nama's place. As the orcs dragged me away, I was in a haze, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. Henry, gone. Maple, taken. Skeeb, strutting like a king over his twisted empire. I couldn't make sense of it, couldn't find a foothold in the chaos. But one thing clung to me, like a shard of glass buried deep in my chest. Was Skeeb only a warlord because he believed he was? Gregory had said it, and it gnawed at me now, even as the world seemed to crumble around me. This place, this cursed, twisted world seemed to justify itself, to warp reality to match the will of its prisoners. Skeeb wasn't powerful because he was powerful. He was powerful because he thought he was, because the system let him be, so I couldn't die. The thoughts took root, sharp and burning in my mind. I focused on it, clinging to it as the orcs dragged me through the mud. I don't know how this place worked. Nobody did. But if Skeeb could shape it to his will, then so could I. I had to. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperation giving way to determination. I can do this, I thought. I can get us out of this. I just have to believe it. Something shifted. At first, it was subtle. A faint hum in my ears, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. But then, it became unbearable. A searing, white-hot pain tore through my body, radiating from my bones outward. I screamed, my voice raw and broken, as my muscles spasmed uncontrollably. The ropes binding me snapped like thread as my body convulsed, twisting in ways that felt impossible. My skin bubbled and split, the pain so intense that I couldn't even tell where it ended and I began. My hands stretched, the fingers elongating into claws that ripped through the remnants of the bindings. My legs bent unnaturally, the joints snapping and reshaping themselves with sickening cracks. I felt my face stretch and warp, my jaw elongating into a snout lined with jagged teeth. My vision blurred, then shapened, the world becoming unnervingly vivid as colors and shapes shifted in impossible ways. Hair. No. Fur erupted from my skin in patches, a sensation like needles stabbing through every pore. My spine arced, a tail forcing itself free with a grotesque pop. My chest expanded, my ribs straining against my skin as my heart hammered wildly, threatening to burst. The pain was relentless, a consuming fire that devoured every part of me. My screams turned guttural, animalistic, as my voice gave way to a deep, rumbling growl. And then it stopped. Part 3. I stood there, panting, the remnants of my shredded clothing clinging to my massive frame. The orcs had released me, stepping back with wide eyes and uncertain grips on their weapons. I could see their fear, smell it, a sharp, acrid sense that made something primal stir in my chest. I looked down at my hands, or what had once been my hands. They were monstrous now, clawed and powerful, dripping with mud and blood. My reflection flickered in a puddle at my feet, but unmistakable. A werewolf. I wasn't human anymore. The realization hit me like a thunderclap, but there was no time to process it. One of the orcs roared, raising his axe, but I moved before he could even swing. I lunged, my claws tearing through his armor like paper, the force of the blow sending him sprawling. Another orc charged, but I turned to him, my teeth bared in a snarl. The world around me dissolved into chaos, my senses overwhelmed by the sharp tang of blood, the deafening clash of steel, and the animalistic fury coursing through my veins. I wasn't in control, not fully, but I didn't care. All that mattered was the fight, the need to protect, to destroy, to end this madness. Through the haze, I saw Gregory and Tiana, their faces stunned but alive. I saw Skeeb, his smug grin replaced by wide-eyed panic as he stumbled backward, his tiny form dwarfed by the chaos around him. And for the first time, I felt hope. Twisted, horrific hope. I wasn't sure what I'd become, but I was sure of one thing. This world wasn't going to win. Everything went black. When I woke, the first thing I became aware of was the sound of crackling fire. Its faint light flickered against the jagged walls of a cave, casting long, uneven shadows. My body ached as if I'd been torn apart and hastily sewn back together. Every muscle screamed with exhaustion and pain. I tried to sit up, but a sharp, burning ache in my chest stopped me. My hands, human again, trembling, pressed into the damp ground as I steadied myself. "Don't." Gregory's voice cut through the quiet, his tone low and clipped. I turned my head toward him, still groggy and disoriented. He was crouched beside Tiana, who leaned against the wall, her arm wrapped in bloodied bandages. She was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes flickered toward me with something hard to define. Resentment, pain, and exhaustion, all rolled into one.
What happened?
I managed, my voice hoarse and cracked. Gregory stood slowly, his movements deliberate, and fixed me with a stare that sent a chill through my chest.
You happened, Glenn.
The weight of his words hit me, but I couldn't process them. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice weak and trembling. Tiana spoke this time, her voice cold and sharp.
You turned. You lost control. You became a monster.
Fragments of memory began clawing their way back, searing pain, the snap of bones, the overwhelming fury. I could still feel the echo of it, the raw, animalistic rage that had consumed me.
The orcs?
I asked, grasping for clarity.
Dead,
Gregory said bluntly.
You tore through them like they were nothing. Didn't leave a single one standing.
A brief flicker of relief coursed through me, but it was short-lived.
It wasn't just them,
Gregory continued, his voice laced with anger. I froze.
What do you mean?
You didn't stop,
Tiana said bitterly, her bandaged arm trembling as she gestured toward herself.
You hit me. You were out of control, lashing out at everything and everyone. I tried to pull you back, but you...
She stopped, her jaw tightening. I stared at her, my stomach twisting.
I didn't mean to. Of course you didn't,
Gregory snapped, stepping closer.
But that didn't stop you, did it?
The weight of their words pressed down on me, but another question burned in the back of my mind.
What about Maple?
I asked, my voice barely audible. Gregory's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. Tiana looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line.
They killed her,
Gregory said, finally, his voice heavy.
The orcs drug her off when they realized you were out of control. By the time we got to her...
He paused, his fists clenching.
She was gone.
The words tore through me like a blade.
No,
I whispered, shaking my head.
No, I was supposed to save her. That's why I... You didn't save her,
Gregory interrupted, his tone sharp.
You killed the orcs, sure. But she's dead, Glenn. She's dead because we couldn't stop them. Because we couldn't stop you.
My breath hitched, and I felt bile rise in my throat. Maple's face flashed in my mind, her warmth, her smile, her touch. The way she reached out to me made me feel less alone. And now, she was gone.
And Skeeb?
I asked, forcing the words out. Gregory's gaze hardened.
You killed him too. He tried to run, but you caught him before he could get far. Didn't even stand a chance.
I stared at him, the full weight of what he was saying crashing down on me.
I didn't mean to,
I said again, my voice breaking.
No, you didn't,
Gregory said, his voice ice cold.
But that hasn't changed what happened. You lost control, Glenn. You let whatever that was take over, and people died.
Tiana shifted slightly, her expression softer but no less firm.
We wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. The orcs would have dragged us all to Nahma, and we'd be worse than dead. But that doesn't make what you did any less horrifying.
I stared at the fire, the flickering flames doing little to chase away the cold knot in my chest. I had saved them. Gregory, Tiana, myself. But at what cost? Mabel was gone. Skeeve was dead, and I'd hurt the very people I was trying to protect.
What am I supposed to do now?
I asked quietly, my voice hollow. Gregory's gaze didn't waver.
You better figure that out, Glenn. Because this,
He gestured to me, his expression unflinching.
this can't happen again.
As the fire crackled and Tiana leaned back against the wall, I felt the weight of my actions settle over me like a shroud. I didn't know what I was anymore. As I sat by the fire, staring into the dancing flames, the pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. Slowly, painfully, the events of the last few hours replayed in my mind, and I couldn't shake a single thought. I made this happen. It wasn't just the rage, the desperation, or even the circumstances. It was the belief, the absolute conviction I'd felt in that moment. The thought had burned in my mind like a brand. I can stop them. I have to stop them. And the world had listened. The memory of Skeeve's smugness came back to me then, his confidence, his arrogance. Gregory's words echoed in my ears. Was Skeeve only a warlord because he believed he was? This world, this twisted, unreal place, justified itself. It bent to belief, to perception, twisting reality to match what you thought was true. Skeeve hadn't been a warlord in the real world. He was a kid, a brash and reckless child, but here, he believed he was. So he became one, and I had believed with every ounce of desperation that I could stop the orcs, that I could save everyone. The price was steep.
I think I understand what happened,
I said, my voice quiet but steady. Gregory and Tiana looked up, their expressions wary.
This place, it's not like the real world,
I continued.
It's not fixed. It's fluid. It adapts to us, to what we believe. That's how Skeeve became a warlord. He wasn't one before, but he thought he could be. He believed it, so the world made it true.
Tiana frowned, her brow furrowed.
And you're saying you did the same thing?
I nodded.
When the orcs had us tied up, I kept thinking about how helpless we were, about how I couldn't let it end like that. And then I thought, if Skeeve could believe something and make it happen, why couldn't I? So I focused. I told myself that I could stop them, that I had to stop them.
And the world responded,
Gregory said, his tone grim.
Yes,
I said, my voice trembling.
But it didn't happen the way I expected. I didn't just stop them. I became something else, a monster. But that's what it took to make it real.
The silence stretched, the crackle of the fire the only sound in the cave.
We've been trying,
Tiana said after a moment, her voice careful.
To reshape things, to bend this world to our will, but it never works.
Why not? I asked.
because we can't actually make ourselves believe it,
Gregory said, his voice sharp.
Not really. We tell ourselves it's possible, but deep down, we don't buy it. We've been here too long. We've seen too much. The doubt's always there, buried in the back of our minds.
I thought about that, about the way my transformation had felt. It hadn't been a conscious effort. Not really. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It had been instinctual, raw, born of desperation and need.
Maybe that's why it worked for me, I said. I wasn't trying to trick myself into believing, I just did. In that moment, I didn't have time to doubt. I didn't question it. I knew I could stop them, and the world made it true.
Gregory's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing.
But at what cost? You lost control, Glenn. You became something you couldn't contain. That's the danger of this place. It twists what you want into something else entirely.
I nodded, the weight of his words settling over me.
I know.
And I don't know if I can control it, but if this place works the way I think it does, maybe there's a way to use it, a way to turn it against itself.
Tiana leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense.
You mean escape?
I hesitated, the thought of Maple's lifeless face flashing in my mind.
If we can find a way to truly believe it, to know we can leave, then maybe the world will let us go.
Gregory's expression darkened.
That's easier said than done. You can't fake belief, Glenn. It has to be real. And after everything we've been through, do you really think any of us can believe that escape is possible?
I didn't have an answer. The fire crackled, its light flickering against the cave walls, and I stared into it, my thoughts churning. The cost of my belief had been high, and I wasn't sure if I could risk paying it again. But the alternative, staying here, trapped in this nightmare, was unthinkable. As we prepared to leave the cave, the question escaped my lips before I could stop myself.
What happens when we die here?
The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one answered. Tiana tightened her badge with a grimace, her expression unreadable. Gregory adjusted his pack, his movements methodical, but neither of them met my gaze. Finally, Tiana spoke, her voice low.
We don't know. I frowned.
You don't know? You've been here longer than I have. You've seen people die, haven't you?
She glanced at Gregory, who shook his head slightly.
We've seen people disappear,
she clarified.
When they die, their bodies vanish. No blood, no trace, no nothing. Like they're erased. Where they go, if they go anywhere, we don't know.
Gregory nodded, his jaw tight.
No one who dies here has ever come back. At least, not that we've seen.
The weight of her words settled over me like a shroud. The idea of death was terrifying enough, but here, where even reality bent and twisted in ways I don't understand, the thought chilled me to my core.
Then we keep moving,
Gregory said firmly, snapping me out of my thoughts.
No point dwelling on it.
We left the cave as the morning mist clung to the forest around us. The world was unnervingly beautiful. Soft sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the ground with shifting patterns of light and shadow. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine. But I couldn't enjoy it. My thoughts kept drifting back to Maple. Her face, her voice, the warmth of her touch. I couldn't stop replaying the moments we'd shared, the way she'd made me feel seen, understood.
She's not real, you know,
Tiana said abruptly, breaking the silence. I turned to her, frowning. What?
Maple,
she said, her tone sharper now.
She wasn't real. None of them are. The NPCs, they're just reflections, mirrors of what this place thinks we want.
I shook my head, my gut twisting.
You don't know that? Yes, I do,
she snapped, stopping in her tracks to face me.
You felt it, didn't you? Deep down, you knew she wasn't real. You just didn't want to believe it.
I opened my mouth to argue, but the words caught in my throat.
Come here,
Tiana said suddenly, walking towards the sound of a nearby stream. A woman stood by the water's edge, fishing with a simple pole. She looked serene, her movements calm and practiced. Tiana approached her, and I followed, reluctantly, unsure of what she was doing. Tiana leaned in, speaking softly to the woman.
He's lonely,
she said, nodding toward me. The woman turned, her face brightening as she set her pole down and made her way over to me.
Hello,
she said, her voice soft and warm.
You seem like you can use some company.
At first I was struck by how different she looked from Maple, her face, her hair, even the way she carried herself. But then, as she spoke, I felt the same pull, the same sense of comfort and understanding. She laughed at just the right moments. Her voice carried the same gentle cadence as her gaze was filled with that same knowing warmth. I felt my stomach twist. Tiana crossed her arms, watching my reaction.
See it now?
She asked, her voice cutting. the realization hitting me like a punch to the chest. This woman wasn't Maple, but she was. The way she acted, the way she spoke, it was all the same.
They're not people, Glenn,
Tiana said, her tone firm.
They're not even trying to be. They're just mirrors. They give you what you think you need, but there's nothing behind it. No soul, no life. Just reflections.
I knew she was right. I had known it from the beginning, but I hadn't wanted to see it. The woman touched my arm gently, her smile kind.
Is there something I can do for you?
I stepped back, pulling away, the hollow ache in my chest growing.
No,
I said, my voice barely above a whisper.
No, thank you.
She tilted her head slightly, her smile never wavering, and returned to the stream without a word. Tiana turned to me, her expression softening slightly.
I get it. It's easier to believe they're real, but they're not. And the sooner you accept that, the better.
I nodded, slowly, the weight of her words settling over me like a stone. I had wanted so desperately to believe in Maple, to believe that connection had been real. But here, in this place, nothing was what it seemed. As we walked away from the stream, I couldn't keep the question from spilling out.
So, Henry,
I said, glancing at Tiana.
He just gave into it all? He built a life here, a family, and just accepted it? How does that even happen when you know this place isn't real?
Tiana sighed, her gaze fixed on the path ahead.
It's not that simple, Glenn. Henry wasn't stupid. He knew. He always knew.
Then why? I pressed. Why go along with it? Why build a family, a house, call it a life when none of it was real? She hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice softer now.
Because sometimes the illusion is easier than the truth. For Henry, it wasn't about what was real. It was about what felt real. The life he built here, it was better than the one he left behind. And if the difference between real and fake is just the way you feel, then what does it matter?
I frowned, trying to wrap my head around it.
But he knew it wasn't real. How could he live with that?
Tiana stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious.
Let me ask you something, Glenn. If you'd never been told this place wasn't real, if you'd never been told that this place wasn't real, if no one ever explains the NPCs, the rules, the mirrors, would you have questioned it? Or would you have just accepted Maple for who she seemed to be?
Her words hit like a slap to the face. I didn't answer, because I knew the truth. She nodded at my silence.
That's what happened to Henry. At first he fought it, just like we all do. He tried to escape, tried to believe there was a way out. But after enough time, he stopped fighting. He told himself that this place was his new reality, and he let it happen. He made it work for him.
I thought back to Henry's face during dinner. His confidence in the world he'd built, the way he spoke about his family, his home, it had all seemed so genuine.
But his family,
I said, my voice quieter now.
Arya, the kids, they were just mirrors, weren't they?
Tiana's expression softened.
Yes, they were. But to Henry, they were real enough. He chose to believe in them because it was easier than facing the alternative.
I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over me.
And you think that's what I should do? No,
she said firmly, meeting my gaze.
Henry made his choice, and it worked for him. But you're not Henry. You're still fighting, Glenn. You haven't given up yet. Don't let this place take that from you.
The conviction in her voice struck a chord in me, and for the first time since waking in this world, I felt a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Not hope, not yet, but something close. We resumed walking, the sound of the stream fading into the background, as though the question still lingered in my mind. I couldn't bring myself to ask it aloud. If this place made it so easy to give in, how much longer could I keep fighting? The air grew heavier as we walked, the light filtering through the canopy, dimming unnaturally as though the sun itself were retreating. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual rustling of leaves and distant chirps of birds replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. Gregory led the way, his eyes darting between the trees, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. Tiana walked beside me, her injured arm cradled close to her chest, her gaze scanning the shadows with the same nervous energy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The forest felt alive, not in the natural, vibrant way that nature usually does, but in a sinister, watchful way, like it was waiting for something.
I don't like this,
Tiana muttered, her voice barely audible over the crunch of our boots on the dirt path.
Neither do I,
Gregory replied, his tone clipped. Stay sharp. The path ahead narrowed, hemmed in by thick, gnarled trees whose roots snaked across the ground like skeletal fingers. The further we went, the darker it got. The forest seemed to close in around us. Then, I heard it. A faint sound, just on the edge of perception, like the hum of a distant melody. It was soft at first, barely more than a whisper carried on the breeze, but it grew louder with each step.
Do you hear that?
I asked, my voice hushed. Gregory nodded, his jaw tight.
Stay close.
The hum became a tune, delicate, almost hypnotic, like a lullaby played on an instrument I couldn't quite identify. It seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere all at once, pulling at the edges of my mind. As we continued, the trees began to change. Their bark, once rough and natural, now glistened as if slick with moisture. Dark, pulsating veins ran along their surfaces, glowing faintly with an unnatural, sickly light.
Glenn?
Tiana's voice trembled as she grabbed my arm. I followed her gaze to a tree just ahead of us. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Its trunk bulged in odd places, the surface warped and uneven. Then I saw it. A face. No, not a face. A twisted impression of a face. Its features warped and frozen in a silent scream. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. The face wasn't carved or painted. It was part of the tree. Its surface stretched and contorted like something trying to break free from within. And then, the humming stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow all sound. The air grew colder, the oppressive weight pressing down harder than before.
Keep moving,
Gregory hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. We picked up the pace, the path widening deeper into the twisted forest. The trees around us were alive with grotesque shapes, faces, hands, even whole bodies. Their forms fused with the wood, their features frozen in expressions of agony.
What the hell is this?
I whispered, my voice shaking.
It's the system,
Tiana said through gritted teeth.
This place, it's breaking.
A sudden noise shattered the silence, a loud, wet crack that echoed through the forest. We all froze, our eyes darting toward the source. One of the trees ahead split open, its trunk tearing apart like flesh. From the opening came a low, guttural sound, like a deep exhale laced with a growl. Something moved inside, its face obscured by the darkness within.
We need to go,
Gregory said, his voice urgent. But before we could take another step, the humming returned, louder this time, more insistent, the melody twisting into a discordant wall that set my teeth on edge. Then, the thing in the tree stepped out. It was tall, impossibly so. Its body a writhing mask of bark and tendrils that moved unnaturally, as though it wasn't bound by the laws of physics. Its face, or what should have been a face, was featureless, smooth and blank like polished wood. And it was watching us. I didn't know how I knew, but I could feel its gaze, cold and unrelenting, piercing into me like a dagger.
Run,
Gregory said, his voice barely audible. None of us argued. We turned and bolted down the path, the creature's wailing hum rising behind us, chasing us to the twisted forest. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, the roots of the trees writhing like living things, trying to trip me as I ran. Branches lashed at my face, the air thick with the stench of rot and decay. My heart hammered in my chest, the adrenaline pushing me forward even as my legs screamed in protest. The humming grew louder, the sound burrowing into my mind, filling my thoughts with chaos. I glanced back and saw it moving towards us. its tendrils stretched unnaturally, pulling it forward in jerking, erratic motions.
Faster! Gregory shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. The path ahead opened up into a clearing, and we burst through the trees, stumbling into the open space. The humming stopped abruptly, the silence more deafening than the noise had been. I turned, expecting the creature to follow, but the forest behind us was still. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their grotesque forms watching, but unmoving.
What the hell was that?
I gasped, doubling over to catch my breath. Gregory didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the tree line. Tiana leaned against a rock, clutching her injured arm, her face pale and drawn. None of us spoke. The silence was too heavy. The weight of what we'd seen pressed down on all of us. We sat in that clearing for what felt like an eternity, the oppressive silence weighing on us like a shroud. The faint whispers started slowly, so low at first that I thought they were my imagination.
Feed me in blood.
The words repeated, soft but insistent, growing louder and more guttural with each iteration.
Feed me in blood.
My skin crawled as the whispering seemed to come from everywhere at once, circling us like a predator. Gregory, Tiana, and I exchanged uneasy glances, none of us daring to speak. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Gregory was the first to move. He stood slowly, his face pale and drawn, his eyes fixed on me with a grim determination.
Sorry, Glenn,
he said, his voice flat and hollow. What? I began, but before I could say another word, he drew his sword. For a split second, I thought he was going to kill me outright, but instead, he raised the hilt and brought it down with brutal force on my knee. The impact was devastating. I had been sitting back against a rock, my knees bent and my feet tucked beneath me. The blow landed with a sickening crunch, the sound echoing in my ears as the pain exploded through my body. It was sharp and immediate, a searing agony that made my stomach lurch. Everything here feels real, even though I know it's not. And let me tell you, the pain was as real as anything I'd ever felt. I screamed, the sound raw and broken, my hands instinctively going to my shattered knee. The world spun as nausea and shock fought for dominance, but what cut through the haze more than anything was the betrayal.
Why?
I gasped, my voice trembling with a mix of pain and disbelief. Gregory didn't answer. His jaw was set, his expression hard as he grabbed me by the shoulders, yanking me forward. Tiana stepped closer, her face filled with sorrow, but she didn't stop him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The two of them hauled me roughly over the rock, my injured knee screaming in protest as it dragged against the rough surface. I tried to fight, but the pain left me weak and disoriented.
"Don't do this,"
I began, my voice cracking. Tiana looked at me one last time, her expression haunted. "We don't have a choice," she said. Then they ran. Part 4. I lay there, sprawled over the rock, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. I tried to push myself up, but the pain in my knee was overwhelming. My leg refused to cooperate. That's when I heard it. The low, guttural growl. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest as I turned my head. It was there, at the edge of the clearing, emerging from the shadows of the twisted forest. The creature. The thing that had stepped out of the tree earlier, its tendrils writhing and its featureless face fixed on me. It moved with a horrible, jerking motion, its body bending and twisting in ways that defied logic. The hum from earlier returned, faint at first, but rising in intensity as it approached. I felt its gaze, if something with no eyes could be said to have a gaze, fixed on me, cold and unrelenting. I was the sacrificial lamb. Gregory and Tiana had chosen me. The realization was like a knife twisting in my gut, cutting deeper than even the pain in my shattered knee. They had left me here, broken and vulnerable, to save themselves. The creature moved closer, its tendrils dragging across the ground, leaving faint scorch marks in the dirt. The hum grew louder. resonating in my skull, making it impossible to think I was alone. And the monster was coming for me. I tried to make myself believe I could escape. I tried to convince myself the monster would vanish, that it would turn away and leave me behind, but no matter how hard I focused, nothing happened. There was a gnawing fear deep inside me. No, not fear. Doubt. It clung to me like chains, heavy and unrelenting, dragging me down. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't believe. Not truly. The certainty that Scabe had wielded, the desperation that had once transformed me, it wasn't there. I was powerless. The monster loomed closer, its tendrils reaching out with deliberate, jerking movements. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything, but my body refused to move. The tendrils wrapped around me, cold and unyielding. They lifted me effortlessly, pulling me toward the creature's chest. The last thing I saw before everything went black was that blank, featureless face staring into me, as if it were swallowing my very soul. When I awoke, I was lying in a river. The shallow water lapped gently against me, barely a few inches deep, its cool touch shocking against my skin. The world around me was eerily calm. The sunlight dappled throughout the trees above. The soft trickle of the stream the only sound. I sat up slowly, the ache in my body lingering but dull. I glanced down, and my breath caught in my throat. My body was wrong. My skin was an amalgamation of flesh and bark, twisted and fused together in unnatural patterns. Patches of wood grew out of me like an infection, rough and splintered, covering parts of my arms, my chest, even my legs. It was grotesque, alien, a nightmare etched into my very being. Panic surged through me, and I began to scrub at the bark frantically, my hands clawing at the wooden patches with desperation.
Get off,
I muttered, my voice trembling.
Get off me.
To my astonishment and relief, it worked. The bark began to flake away, revealing raw, tender flesh beneath. I scrubbed harder, ignoring the sting, until every piece of the twisted wood was gone. My skin returned to normal. I knelt there in the river, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps, the water washing away the remnants of my panic. It wasn't until I stopped that I realized there was something else, something I hadn't noticed in my frenzy. Music. A soft, lilting tune carried gently on the breeze. I turned my head toward the sound, my heart pounding anew, though this time it wasn't fear. There, on the riverbank, I saw a small campfire, its flames flickering softly. Beside it stood a tent, simple and unassuming, and sitting cross-legged in front of it was a figure. A man playing a pipe. The melody was hauntingly sweet, both calming and unsettling in equal measure. The man's head was bowed, his orange hair catching the sunlight like the glow of a dying sunset. I froze, unable to look away. The tune faded as he slowly lowered the pipes from his lips, turning his head toward me. His face was young, yet his eyes carried the weight of ages, black as the void, dotted with a faint shimmer of stars. "Shell," I whispered, my voice trembling. "The piper." He smiled faintly, his expression unreadable as he watched me from across the river. As I climbed out of the river, my legs unsteady beneath me, he rose from his seat and gestured toward a neatly folded set of clothes lying beside the fire. I glanced down at myself, realizing with embarrassment that I had nothing, not even the rags I'd worn before. "Take them," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You'll need them." I dressed quickly, the simple tunic and trousers fitting well enough. The fabric was rough but warm, and the small act of covering myself brought an odd sense of grounding after everything that had happened. As I tied the last knot, I turned to him, my chest tightening with the weight of my question. What happened to me?" He tilted his head slightly, the faintest hint of sorrow in his dark, star-speckled eyes. "You died," he said simply. "Or at least a part of you did. You were turned into a leshy, a servant of the woods, bound to Nahma's will." The words sent a chill through me.
I was patrolling the woods, like the monster we saw. He nodded. Yes, the fate of all who perish here. Their souls are rewoven, reshaped into her beasts, tools for her dominion. My stomach churned as I processed his words. The faces in the trees, the creature that had taken me, they were all like me. People who had fought, struggled, and lost, now twisted into something unrecognizable. And then, how did you find me? I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled, faintly, a mysterious glint in his eyes. Perhaps a part of you knew you needed to be found. Perhaps it was your belief, even buried beneath your fear, that called me to you. I stared at him, my mind reeling. So, you're saying I saved myself? His expression didn't change. I'm saying that sometimes, when a soul is still strong, it reaches for something greater. And sometimes, it is answered. I had so many questions, more than I could possibly articulate. What was this place, truly? How did he know so much, and why did he care? But before I could ask, he raised the pipes to his lips and began to play. The melody was haunting and beautiful, the kind of tune that reached deep into your soul and stirred something you couldn't name. It wasn't like the humming of the creature in the woods. This was different, pure, cleansing, and sad. As he played, his form began to shimmer, the edges of his body dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. Wait, I said, stepping forward, my hand outstretched. Don't go. He didn't stop playing. His form faded further, his hair catching the last rays of sunlight before it disappeared entirely. Please, I whispered, my voice breaking. But he was gone, and I was left alone by the fire, the tune lingering in my ears like the echo of a dream. I sat down, heavily, staring into the flames, my mind racing. The warmth of his presence, the depth of his words, they had felt real. But the question blurred in my mind, refusing to be silenced. Was that truly the Piper? Or was it just the world justifying my salvation? The thought lingered, unanswered, as the fire crackled softly in the quiet of the forest. As I rose from the fire and began wandering along the trail near the riverbank, I felt unmoored, adrift in this strange, unpredictable world. The path ahead was faint, winding into the forest in a way that seemed both purposeful and completely random. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to move. The forest grew denser as I walked, the sunlight dimming beneath the thick canopy. Every sound felt magnified, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the rustle of branches in the breeze, the distant calls of unseen birds. My mind raced with questions about what had just happened, about the Piper, the Leshy, the rules of this twisted place. That's when it happened. A faint snap echoed from somewhere behind me. Before I could react, figures burst out of the underbrush, one after another, surrounding me in a semicircle. Brigands. They were a rough-looking bunch, dressed in mismatched armor and wielding crude but menacing weapons. There were at least a dozen of them, their faces grim and eager, like wolves circling their prey. From among them, a man stepped forward. He was tall and broad, with a patchy beard and a scar running down the side of his face. His armor was slightly better than the others, though still piecemeal, and a large sword rested on his shoulder. Well, well, he said, his voice gruff and mocking. Don't you know this is a tolled road? I froze, panic surging through me. Was I about to die again? Would I be dragged off to captivity, or worse, turned into another of Nahma's beasts? My mind raced for an answer, a way out, but nothing came. And then, it hit me. I don't know what possessed me, maybe desperation, maybe the lingering memory of Skeeb's arrogance, but I decided to gamble everything on the most ridiculous plan I could think of. I decided to gaslight the shit out of them. I straightened up, puffing out my chest, and plastered a look of indignation across my face. Is this any way to treat your boss? I said, my voice loud and commanding.
The brigands hesitated, their expressions flickering between confusion and amusement. The leader narrowed his eyes.
What did you say?
I scoffed, shaking my head like a disappointed parent.
Unbelievable. I step away for one day and this is what happens? My own men pointing weapons at me like common highway trash? Do you have any idea how foolish you look right now?
The leader blinked, clearly taken aback.
You're... what? Our boss? Of course I am.
I snapped, throwing my arms wide.
You don't recognize me because I've been undercover, you dolts. Testing you. And guess what? You're failing, miserably.
The bandits exchanged uneasy glances, their weapons wavering. I could feel the doubt creeping in, and I pressed harder.
You really think someone would wander this road alone without knowing it's told? I said, jabbing a finger toward the leader. You think I don't know every inch of my territory? I built this operation, and now I see it's being run by a bunch of incompetent fools who can't even recognize their own commander.
The leader took a half step back, the confidence draining from his face.
Wait, you're saying you're in charge? Of course I am, I barked. If you don't start acting like it, heads are gonna roll. You think I don't know where the treasury is? Where the secret entrances to the strongholds are? Shall I prove it to you?
The group visibly wavered now, several of the brigands lowering their weapons entirely.
I didn't realize.
One of them stammered.
Didn't realize.
I interrupted, rounding on him.
Didn't realize. That's exactly the problem. None of you think. You just swing your swords and grunt like the dimwits you are. No wonder our profits are down.
The leader looked flustered, glancing nervously at his men.
Sorry, boss. We didn't know. Sorry doesn't cut it. I snapped, glaring at him. Do you think Nahma will accept apologies when we can't deliver our tribute? No. Then why should I?
At the mention of Nahma, the brigades all stiffened, their faces blanching with fear.
Boss, please,
another bandit said, dropping to one knee.
Forgive us. We didn't mean to offend.
One by one, the rest of them followed suit, bowing their heads and muttering apologies. I stared at them, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe it had worked.
Fine, I said, waving a hand dismissively. You're lucky I'm in a forgiving mood, but this is your last chance. One more mistake like this, and I'll personally see to it that you'll regret it.
The leader nodded quickly, his face pale.
Understood, boss. Please, let us escort you back to the stronghold.
They actually had a stronghold. My stronghold, apparently. I gave a curt nod, trying to maintain my composure. Lead the way. As the bandits gathered themselves and began moving, I followed, struggling to keep my disbelief in check. For the first time, I realized how foolish I had been to care about an NPC like Maple. These brigands weren't people. They were props in this world, tools to be used, reflections of whatever the system thought I needed them to be. It was sobering and strangely liberating. They led me through the forest until we emerged at a sprawling fortress nestled in a hollow. Its walls were high and jagged, and its towers loomed over the surrounding trees.
Welcome back, boss,
the leader said, gesturing toward the gate with a nervous smile. I took a deep breath, staring up at the stronghold that was now mine. Over the following days, I stayed with the brigands, if you could even call them that anymore. It was during this time that I truly began to understand the strange rules of this world, and more importantly, how to bend them. I'd already discovered how difficult it was to make myself believe something enough to manifest it, but I realized that the NPCs, well, they were different. They weren't like me. They didn't carry the same doubts or complexities of thought. Their realities seemed malleable, and with a little push in the right direction, they could be made to believe just about anything. And once they believed something, the world reshaped itself to fit their belief. It started on the first day. I was hungry, and I demanded a feast. The brigands nodded dutifully and led me to the food stores. Empty barrels and shelves greeted me, the hollow echoes of the room mocking my request. I tried to manifest food myself, focusing as hard as I could, but it was no use. I just couldn't make myself believe it into existence. But then, an idea struck me. I walked back to the brigands, who stood around awkwardly and fixed them with a stern glare.
Are you telling me that you didn't check properly? That you let your own laziness insult me and deny me the feast I deserve?
They exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure.
We We looked, boss,
one of them muttered.
No,
I snapped, my voice rising.
you thought you looked, but you didn't. You didn't try hard enough. Now go back in there and search again. I know there's food in those stores. There has to be. Find it.
They hesitated, but my insistence pushed them into action. They scrambled back into the storehouse, muttering apologies and assurances that they'd do better this time. When they emerged a short while later, they were carrying crates overflowing with bread, cured meats, and fresh produce.
See,
I said, my arms crossed as they laid the food out in front of me.
what did I tell you? You just weren't looking hard enough.
They bowed their heads, apologizing profusely, while I stood there in shock, barely able to contain my disbelief. I had just gaslit reality into bending itself to their perception. The next day, I noticed how much of a dump the stronghold was. Most of it was little more than a ramshackle camp inside a crumbling fortress. The walls barely standing, and the living conditions abysmal. I walked through the ruins, shaking my head at the sight of it all.
Unacceptable,
I muttered loud enough for the brigands to hear. When they gathered around me, I pointed to the mess and started talking.
You call this a stronghold? I said, my voice dripping with disdain. This isn't a stronghold. It's an embarrassment. And yet you let it stand like this, unclean, unkempt. How do you expect anyone to take us seriously if this is how we present ourselves?
One of the brigands scratched his head.
We don't have the supplies to fix it, boss. Nonsense,
I snapped.
You've already fixed it. You just don't remember because you're too busy slacking off. You've cleaned this place up days ago. You repaired the walls, swept the floors, replaced the furniture. It's spotless, isn't it? Or am I wrong?
The brigands exchanged nervous glances, but the doubt in their eyes began to fade.
Yeah, one of them said slowly. Yeah, we did fix it up, didn't we? Yes, you did, I said firmly, and you did a damn good job of it. Now take a moment to admire your work.
I left them standing there, their expressions turning from confusion to pride as I stepped outside. When I returned to the courtyard a short while later, the stronghold was unrecognizable. The walls were pristine, the floors swept clean, the buildings repaired and reinforced. What had once been a ruin was now an impeccable fortress, towering over the surrounding forest with an air of authority. I didn't stop there. Once I saw what was possible, I realized the true extent of my power in this world. The brigands were still bandits at heart, their habits crude and their morals non-existent, but I saw an opportunity to make them into something more, something better. I gathered them in the main hall, their eyes wide and expectant as they waited for me to speak. "You're not brigands," I said, pacing in front of them. "You never were. That's not who you are. You're warriors, noble warriors. You fight for the people, for the weak, for those who cannot fight for themselves. You are protectors, not thieves." The words hung in the air, their weight sinking into the minds of the brigands. One of them frowned.
We fight for the people?
"Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "You've always fought for the people. You're virtuous warrior priests, champions of justice and defenders of the downtrodden. That's who you are. That's who you've always been." At first, there was silence. Then, slowly, they began to nod.
"Yeah, that makes sense," one of them said. "Yeah,"
another chimed in.
"We've always fought for the people, haven't we?"
I smiled. "Exactly. And this fortress, it's a temple, a place of refuge and strength for all who seek it. And you're its guards." From that moment on, the transformation was unstoppable. The brigands discarded their crude weapons and patched armor, replacing them with noble garb and polished steel. The stronghold became a beacon in the forest, a place of sanctuary for the travelers and traders alike. People began arriving. Farmers, merchants, wanderers, all seeking shelter, trade, or protection. The fortress buzzed with activity, its halls filled with purpose and pride. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had taken what was broken and made it whole. I had turned chaos into order, despair into hope. And for the first time since arriving in this world, I began to feel something strange, something I hadn't felt in a long time. pride. Days turned to weeks and then to months. The fortress was no longer just a place. It was a kingdom unto itself. And I was its Lord Commander, its High Priest. It was mine, forged by my will and guided by my hand. Under my leadership, the stronghold flourished. The temple halls echoed with purpose. The armory was stocked with weapons of gleaming steel, and the people, my people, looked to me as their protector, their leader, their savior. I became lost in it all. Every day was filled with decisions, proclamations, and ceremonies. Every night brought feasts and celebrations in my honor. I was adored, revered, and I reveled in it. The power was intoxicating, the world bending to my every whim as long as I could convince the NPCs to believe it. But the deeper I sank into the role, the more the lines between what was real and what was false blurred. The Piper, Maple, Skube. These memories flicked in and out of my mind like fleeting dreams, distant and unimportant compared to the life I had built here. Until the day everything changed. It was an ordinary afternoon. The sun was high, the courtyard bustling with life as merchants set up stalls and warriors sparred in the training room. I wandered through it all, my presence enough to part crowds and draw bows of respect. That's when I saw her. A book merchant, standing by a small, colorful stall stacked with leather-bound tomes and scrolls. She was beautiful, her hair dark and flowing, her eyes sharp and captivating. Her voice carried an enchanting lilt as she spoke with a customer. But as I drew closer, something about her struck me as wrong. It wasn't her appearance, though I didn't help but notice how perfect it was. Too perfect. Her movements, her tone, even her smile. They were warm and inviting, but there was something hollow beneath the surface. She reminded me of Maple. The realization hit me like a slap, and I froze in place. It wasn't just that she looked familiar. It was the feeling she gave me. That same intoxicating comfort, that same sense of being understood and seen. And with that came a flood of memories. I hadn't forgotten that this world wasn't real, but I had pushed it to the back of my mind, buried it beneath the weight of my new life. Now, staring at this woman who felt so much like Maple, it all came rushing back. This wasn't real. None of it. The thought made my chest tighten, the weight of everything I'd built suddenly pressing down on me like a crushing tide. But before I could dwell on it, a commotion broke out in the courtyard. Shouts and the clatter of armor echoed across the open space as a group of my soldiers marched through the gates, dragging 2 prisoners behind them. The crowd parted, murmurs rippling through the onlookers as the soldiers forced the captives to their knees in the center of the courtyard. "Commander," one of the soldiers called, his voice sharp and commanding. "We've captured 2 criminals attempting to sneak into the fortress." I stepped forward, my heart pounding as I approached the scene. The prisoners were bound, their faces obscured by sacks, their shoulders slumped in defeat. "Let me see them," I ordered, my voice steady despite the unease creeping in my chest. The soldiers nodded and stepped back, yanking the sacks from their heads. I stopped dead. Gregory and Tiana knelt before me, their faces battered and bruised but unmistakable. Their eyes widened as they looked up at me, and I saw a flicker of something in their expressions. Relief, disbelief, and maybe even a hint of anger. "Glenn," Tiana's voice was hoarse but steady. "Is that you?" I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The world I had built, the identity I had claimed, the life I had embraced, it all came crashing down around me in that moment. Because here they were, flesh and blood, real in a way this place never could be. "Commander," one of the soldiers asked, his voice hesitant, "what should we do with them?" I looked down at Gregory and Tiana, my mind racing. For the first time in months, I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. My first reaction was rage. It consumed me instantly. boiled up from the pit of my stomach and spreading like wildfire, my heart pounding in my chest, each beat loud and deliberate, as though it were driving the storm inside me. The sight of Gregory and Tiana kneeling there, bruised and bound, sent a torrent of emotions crashing through me. Betrayal, anger, resentment. The people I trusted most had left me to die, and now here they were, caught sneaking into my fortress, into my domain. My fists clenched at my sides as the anger demanded to be heard, words buried on the edge of my tongue, sharp and cruel, ready to be unleashed. But before I could speak, something strange happened. At first, I thought it was the adrenaline, the way the world always seemed to slow down in moments of intensity. But this was different. The soldiers froze in place, their hands still gripping Gregory and Tiana. The wind stopped moving, the banners hanging from the battlements falling unnaturally still. Even the faint hum of the bustling fortress behind me ceased entirely. Time had stopped. I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. The silence was deafening, the stillness suffocating. Then I saw it. On the battlement, above the courtyard, leaning casually against the stone wall, was the piper. He wasn't playing this time. The pipes rested at his side, and his dark eyes, those infinite star-speckled eyes, were fixed on me. Before I could speak, he moved. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed something through the air. I barely had time to reach before my hand moved instinctively, catching it. The pipes. I stared down at them in my hands, their surface smooth and cool, the faint hum of their power thrumming against my skin. When I looked back up, he was gone. Time resumed. The noise of the courtyard rushed back in all at once, the shuffling of soldiers, the murmurs of the crowd, the crackle of the banners in the breeze. I stood there, staring at the pipes in my hands, the weight of them more than physical. The rage that had consumed me moments before seemed to dissolve, replaced by a single, undeniable truth. It didn't matter if there had truly been Shell, or just an image, a manifestation of this world bending to my need. His presence, real or not, meant the same thing. Mercy. I took a deep breath, the pipes still clutched tightly in my hand, and turned to the soldiers. "Free them," I said, my voice calm but firm. The soldier nearest to me hesitated.
"But, Commander, they..."
"Free them," I repeated, my tone leaving no room for argument. The soldiers obeyed, cutting Gregory and Tiana's bonds. They both staggered slightly as they rose to their feet, their eyes fixed on me with a mix of confusion and caution. I met their gazes, holding the pipes tightly in my hand. "You're not criminals," I said, my voice steady. "You're free to leave or stay. The choice is yours." Gregory and Tiana exchanged a look, but neither spoke. Without another word, I turned and walked back toward the fortress, the pipes in my hand a quiet reminder of what had just happened. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my choices. This world may have been mine to shape, but that didn't mean I was free to ignore what it demanded of me. And as I passed through the gates and into the halls of my fortress, one thought lingered in my mind. Mercy wasn't just for them. It was for me, too. As I stepped through the gates into the fortress, the air grew heavy, the temperature dropping so quickly that my breath fogged in the chill. The torches along the walls flickered, their flames shrinking to faint, struggling embers. Then it hit me. A pressure like nothing I'd ever felt before crashed down on me, driving me to my knees. It was as if the weight of the entire world had been placed on my shoulders. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and a sharp, stabbing pain pulsed through my skull. I clutched at the ground, trying to steady myself, but the floor beneath me wasn't steady. It writhed, pulsing like it was alive, the cold stone shifting into something warm and fleshy. Voices rose around me, faint at first but growing louder. Laughter, whispers, screams, all blending into a chaotic symphony of sound.
"Poor, fragile Glenn,"
she purred, soft yet commanding, dripping with mocking sweetness.
Even with all your power, you remain so breakable.
Oh. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened, the words choking in my chest.
You know who I am,
she said, the laughter fading as her tone turned sharp and cold.
I am Nama. I am the one who brought you back from the woods, from the chains of the Leshy. It was my will that unbound you, Glenn. My will that returned you to yourself. And yet, you dare to question me.
The walls of the fortress dissolved into a swirling void of shadows and light. The throne emerged before me, massive and jagged, its surface pulsing with a dark, blood-red glow. Upon it sat a figure cloaked in shadow, her form shifting and indistinct, yet undeniably present.
You amuse me,
she continued, her voice wrapping around me like silk.
With your defiance, your clever little games. But tell me, Glenn, what has it all earned you? A crumbling temple of lies, built on the backs of puppets who would cease to exist without your belief.
Her words struck deep, but before I could respond, an image appeared in the swirling void beside her. It was me, my body, but not me. I was walking through the mortal world like a machine, my movements stiff and robotic, my eyes empty. The same hollowness I'd seen in those glazed-over people when this all began. She laughed, a low and mocking sound.
Do you wish to return to this?
She taunted.
To this life of obscurity, chasing mysteries that no one cares about, writing your little stories for the few who even bother to read them, and the even fewer who believe you.
The image shifted. I saw myself again, sitting alone in a dimly lit room, surrounded by books and notes, my face drawn and tired. The loneliness radiated from the scene, a sharp, familiar ache that I couldn't deny.
You can stay here,
she said, her tone softening into a tempting sweetness.
Here you are a king, a savior. Here you are adored, respected, worshipped. All that I ask is a small thing in return. The interlopers, Gregory and Tiana. They do not belong. Hand them over to me, and paradise is yours, forever.
Her presence pressed down harder, the pain in my head growing unbearable as her words coiled around me. I tried to speak, to answer, but my thoughts were a tangled mess of fear, doubts, and temptation.
Think carefully, Glenn,
she hissed, her voice sharper now.
This is the only life where you matter. Out there, you are nothing. Here, you can have everything.
My throat tightened as I forced out a response. Let me think. The laughter returned, cruel and echoing, as the shadows around her throne surged closer.
Yes,
she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction.
Think long and hard, my dear. And when you are ready to make the right choice, I will be waiting.
The void around me collapsed, the world snapping back into place as I found myself kneeling on the cold stone floor of the fortress. The pain in my head subsided, but her words lingered, heavy and inescapable. The image of my empty, robotic self walking through the mortal world burned in my mind, a cruel reminder of what waited for me if I refused her offer. And yet, somewhere beneath the fear and doubt, a single thought stirred, faint but persistent. Was it better to be nothing in the real world than everything in a lie? I stood there for a moment, the cold stone beneath me grounding me in a reality I wasn't sure was mine anymore. Nahma's words lingered in my mind, her taunts echoing like a cruel refrain.
This is the only life where you matter. Part 5. The fortress seemed quieter now, the usual bustle of activity muted, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of what had just happened. My eyes drifted to a soldier standing nearby, and something inside me compelled me to act. "You!" I called out sharply. "Brad, come here!" The man turned to me, his expression confused.
My name is Arnold, sir.
I scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "No, it's Brad." For a moment, he hesitated, his brow furrowing as if trying to reconcile what I had said with his own identity. Then I saw it. His expression softened, the confusion melting away as his mind seemed to reorient itself.
Of course, sir, he said with a faint smile. My mother always loved the name, that's why she named me Brad.
The response sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't meant it. I hadn't tried to change him, not really, but it had happened all the same, effortlessly and without question. "Good, Brad," I said, my voice tight as I fought to keep my composure. "I have a task for you."
Anything, my lord,
he said, standing straighter, the new name seeming to fit him already. I glanced down and saw the pipes lying on the floor where I had dropped them. The sight of them stirred something deep in my chest, a weight, a presence I couldn't ignore. I knelt, slowly, picking them up. The cool metal felt heavier now, more significant, as if they carried the weight of everything I had done and everything I had yet to face. Straightening, I turned back to Brad. "Find me a priestess of Nahma. I seek entry to her palace." Brad hesitated only briefly before nodding.
Yes, my lord, right away.
As he turned to carry out my command, I remained rooted in place, gripping the pipes tightly. My decision wasn't fully formed, but the words had spilled out before I could stop them. I needed answers. I needed to see her palace. I stood in the dimly lit hall, the weight of the pipes heavy in my hand. When the doors creaked open behind me, I turned to see Gregory and Diana stepping in, their expressions a mix of wariness and exhaustion. Gregory's face was lined with tension, his usual confidence tempered, while Diana's sharp eyes scanned the room like she was expecting a fight. For a moment, none of us said anything. The air between us was thick with tension, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on all of us.
"You've built quite the fortress,"
Gregory said at last, his voice carrying a hint of dry sarcasm. "Yeah," I replied, my tone flat. "Didn't expect to see you two here, though. Thought you'd cut me loose for good." Tiana's gaze flickered, something between guilt and defensiveness crossing her face.
We didn't have a choice, Glenn. That thing in the forest, it was either leave you behind or let all of us get taken.
"You didn't have a choice,"
I repeated, bitterness creeping into my voice. "That's the line you're going with." Gregory stepped forward, his jaw tight.
"Look, you don't get it. We had to run. We barely made it out ourselves. If we'd stayed,
You'd have ended up like me?
I interrupted, my voice rising.
The Leshy? Another monster patrolling this nightmare of a world. Except I didn't stay, did I? I fought. I clawed my way back. Alone. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Tiana took a step closer, her voice softer now.
We didn't know, Glenn. We thought you were gone. That there was no saving you.
And what? Now you've changed your mind? I snapped, the bitterness spilling out. You didn't care enough to stay, but now that I've got a fortress and an army, you come crawling back.
That's not fair, Gregory said, his voice sharp. You think we wanted to leave you? Do you think we didn't feel like cowards for it? You think it didn't tear us up inside?
I opened my mouth to retort, but the look in his eyes stopped me. There was pain there. Real, raw pain.
We've been searching for a way out ever since,
Tiana said, her tone quieter now.
We've risked everything trying to find answers, trying to find you.
I looked between them, my anger faltering as their words sank in.
You've been looking for me?
I asked, my voice softer.
Of course we have,
Gregory said, his shoulders slumping.
We couldn't just leave it like that. We knew what we did was wrong, but we thought maybe we could make it right.
The frustration simmered, but the fire had started to die down. I turned away, running a hand through my hair, the pipes cool against my palm. I was angry, I admitted, after a long pause, my voice low. I'm still angry, but I get it. I know what this place does to people, and I can't blame you for running when I might have done the same. Tiana stepped closer, her gaze steady.
We didn't come here to fight, Glenn. We came here to help, if you'll let us.
I sighed, turning back to face them. So, what now? You expect me to just forgive and forget?
No, Gregory said firmly. But we can start over. Work together, like we did before. Maybe this time we'll actually get out of here.
I stared at him for a long moment, the anger and betrayal still lingering in the back of my mind. But beneath it all, there was something else. Relief. Relief that I wasn't alone anymore. Fine, I said, finally, my voice steady. But don't expect me to let it go overnight. You left me behind. That's not something I'm going to forget anytime soon.
We wouldn't expect you to,
Tiana said, her voice soft but resolute.
But we'll prove ourselves to you, however long it takes.
A silence settled between us, not quite comfortable, but no longer hostile. I glanced at the pipes in my hand, their weight feeling a little lighter now. Then I looked back at Gregory and Tiana, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. So, I said, breaking the quiet, you guys want to get out of here? Gregory grinned, and Tiana nodded, determination sparking in her eyes.
Let's do it,
Gregory said. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we had a chance. Finally, Brad returned, guiding a robed figure into the chamber. The priestess of Nahma stood before us, her presence commanding and serene. Her flowing crimson robes shimmered faintly, and her piercing gaze carried an unsettling mix of devotion and attachment. I wasted no time. Using the same technique that had bent this world's reality to my will time and again, I began to speak. My words were calm but deliberate, weaving a narrative that pulled at her loyalty. I praised her wisdom, her insight, and her devotion, subtly suggesting that she had already seen the cracks in Nahma's supposed paradise. I told her that her true purpose, her real purpose, was to guide us, not as servants of Nahma, but as agents of something greater. Her stoic expression faltered. Slowly, I saw the shift. Her confidence wavered, then collapsed entirely, her eyes lighting up with the fervor of someone who believed they'd discovered a higher truth.
Of course, she whispered, bowing her head. You are right. I will serve you.
I couldn't help but glance at Gregory and Tiana. The shock on their faces was almost comical. Gregory leaned in, muttering under his breath.
That must have been how Henry did it.
I straightened, turned back to the priestess. Tell us how to reach Nahma's place. Her expression was both detailed and chilling, describing the trials and layers of deception woven into Nahma's domain, but one thing was clear. We would not be able to slip in unnoticed. When she finished, I stood, silent for a moment, processing her words. Then, the realization hit me. We'll need an army, I said. Tiana folded her arms, raising an eyebrow.
You've got one, but they're NPCs. Nahma could rewrite them with a thought.
I hesitated, the truth of her words sinking in. But then, an idea struck me. No, I said, turning toward the door. Not if I make them more. The courtyard was packed. Every soldier, every warrior, every person loyal to the fortress stood assembled before me. Hundreds of them, all standing at attention, their weapons gleaming and their faces blank with unquestioning obedience. I climbed the steps to the central platform, Gregory and Tiana trailing behind me. Gregory's expression was skeptical, while Tiana watched in silence, her sharp gaze unwavering. As I reached the top, I turned to face the crowd. I poured everything I had into my words. I spoke of freedom, of purpose, of the strength they carried within them. I told them of the battle to come and the reason it mattered. Not just for us, but for the world beyond. The speech came from a place deeper than I expected, filled with raw conviction and hope. I finished with a call to arms, demanding not just their loyalty, but their belief. When I was done, the courtyard was silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Gregory leaned in, his voice low.
That was a good speech, but it doesn't solve the problem that they're NPCs. They'll do what they're told, nothing more.
I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled the pipes from my belt. Gregory stiffened, his eyes widening.
Glenn?
I raised the pipes to my lips and began to play. The tune poured out of me, a melody I didn't consciously create, but felt deep in my soul. It was the song of hope, of purpose, of freedom. Each note reflected what I wanted for them, not just soldiers, not just tools, but people with the power to choose. The sound filled the courtyard, resonating off the walls, weaving through the crowd. I closed my eyes, letting the music guide me, trusting in its power. When I finished, I lowered the pipes, my heart pounding. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd remained still, their faces unreadable. Then, one by one, the soldiers began to move. Not mechanically, not as puppets, but with a spark of something new. I saw it in their eyes, in the way they stood taller, straighter, their expressions shifting to something closer to awareness. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. The army wouldn't turn. They were free from the script. Gregory stared at them, then back at me, his jaw slack.
You did it,
he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my grip tightening on the pipes. We have our way in, and now we have the strength to use it. The march toward Nahma's palace grew more grueling with each passing day. The terrain had changed dramatically. Gone were the rolling hills and dense forests, replaced by jagged cliffs and sheer drops that seemed to stretch endlessly. By the third day, the air itself felt heavier, thick with an unnatural stillness that made every step harder than the last. We left the bulk of the army behind, taking out a handful of trusted soldiers to scout ahead. The fewer people we brought into the unknown, the better our chances of avoiding attention. Or so we thought. The gorge came into view as we rounded a bend. It was an immense chasm, cutting through the land like a wound. The depths were impossible to see, the shadows below swallowing everything in their wake. The only way across was a rope bridge, ancient and weathered, its wooden planks warped and splintered with age. Tiana knelt at the edge, inspecting the ropes that stretched across the abyss.
It's stable enough, she said, though her hesitation was clear.
Stable enough isn't exactly comforting,
Gregory muttered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He glanced around, his eyes narrowing as they scanned the cliffs above.
This place feels wrong, like we're being watched.
I didn't respond, but I felt it too. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, and the oppressive silence of the gorge weighed heavily on my chest. Even the wind, faint as it was, seemed reluctant to disturb the stillness. We crossed slowly, one at a time, the bridge creaking and swaying with every step. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look down into the abyss. Behind me, the soldiers moved cautiously, their armor clinking softly as they held onto the ropes for balance. When we reached the other side, the ground felt solid beneath my feet, but the unease didn't lift. Tiana stayed close, her bow in hand, her movements tense and deliberate. Gregory lingered near the edge, his gaze fixed on the opposite cliff.
This place is a death trap,
he muttered. I nodded, my grip tightening on my weapon. We'll scout ahead, make sure it's safe, then we'll bring the rest of the army through. We pressed on, the path narrowing as it hugged the edge of the gorge. The cliffs loomed high above us, their jagged faces casting long shadows that shifted as the sun dipped lower in the sky. And then, the sound started. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, a soft, clicking noise that echoed faintly to the gorge. I stopped, my heart skipping a beat as I strained to listen.
Do you hear that?
Tiana asked, her voice low. Gregory nodded, his expression hardening.
Yeah, and I don't like it.
The clicking grew louder, faster, like the sound of claws tapping against stone. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating through the gorge in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint the source. Stay sharp, I said, my voice steady despite the growing tension in my chest. We moved cautiously, every step deliberate as the sound grew closer. The soldiers gripped their weapons tightly, their eyes darting to the cliffs above. And then, the clicking stopped. The sudden silence was deafening, the absence of sound more unsettling than the noise itself. I glanced at Gregory and Tiana, their faces pale and tense.
What?
A shadow moved high above us, and my words died in my throat. Another shadow, and another. Something massive shifted in the cliffs, dislodging a cascade of loose rocks that tumbled down toward the path. The clicking resumed, louder and faster now, a chaotic symphony of noise that echoed through the gorge.
Move!
Gregory barked, his voice cutting through the rising panic. But it was too late. She appeared. Mama Webster descended from the cliffs like a nightmare made of flesh, her massive body blotting out the sky. Her legs, long and segmented, moved with horrifying speed, their tips tapping against the stone with a rhythmic precision. Her fur glistened like wet tar, and her countless eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger that sent a chill down my spine. Part 6. She let out a shriek, a piercing, bone-rattling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. For a moment, none of us moved, frozen in the grip of pure terror. We turned around to head back. The retreat back to the gorge was hurried, the weight of what we'd seen hanging over all of us. Mama Webster's monstrous form, the sight of her descending from the cliffs, had left an incredible mark on every one of us. Her grotesque presence, even for just a moment, was a reminder of what we were truly up against.
This isn't the way forward, I said,
my voice sharp as we approached the bridge. The soldiers lingered just ahead, their eyes darting nervously at every shadow.
We can't get an army through here. It's too dangerous. We need another way.
Gregory turned, his expression grim.
Agreed. This path is suicide. Let's regroup and come up with something else.
Tiana was already scanning the cliffs above, her bow drawn and ready.
Move fast. She's still out there.
The bridge came into view, swaying gently in the faint breeze. It felt different now, less a route forward and more a fragile, fleeting link to safety. Every creak of the wood sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me.
Go,
Gregory said, waving the soldiers forward.
One at a time. Don't rush it.
The soldiers began crossing, their movements careful and deliberate, the ropes groaning faintly under their weight. Gregory and Tiana stayed at my sides, their weapons drawn. The stillness of the gorge was deafening, the faint rustling of the wind barely audible. And then the clicking began. It started faintly, like before, a sound so soft it could have been a trick of the mind, but as it grew louder, faster, and closer, the sense of dread returned with full force.
She's here,
Tiana said, her voice tight. The clicking echoed from above and around us, impossible to track. The soldiers on the bridge froze, their eyes wide as the sound reverberated through the gorge.
Move,
I shouted, waving them forward. They scrambled to obey, their boots clattering against the wooden planks as the bridge swayed dangerously. Tiana loosened an arrow into the shadows above, but it was impossible to tell if it hit anything.
Then she appeared.
Mama Webster surged over the cliff, her massive form blotting out the light. Her legs moved with impossible speed, their sharp tips slamming into the stone path as she scuttled toward us. Her body glistened with oil-like fur, and her many eyes gleamed with a cold, predatory hunger. She let out a piercing shriek that seemed to shake the air itself, the sound rattling my teeth and sending a jolt of terror through me.
Run,
Gregory shouted, grabbing my arm and shoving me toward the bridge. I stumbled onto the planks, the structure swaying violently beneath my feet. The soldiers were nearly across, their frantic movements sending the ropes creaking. Tiana turned, firing arrow after arrow at the monstrous creature, but they barely slowed her down. Mama Webster's legs struck the bridge as she lunged, her weight causing the planks to groan and splinter. I reached the middle, Gregory and Tiana close by, but I could feel her closing in. One of her legs slammed down inches from me, the force sending me sprawling onto the planks. I scrambled to my feet, but she was already upon us, her massive form blocking the path ahead. She lunged, her mandibles snapping inches from my face. I raised the weapon, but her leg struck me hard, knocking me onto my back. I stared up at her, my chest heaving as I struggled to move. Her eyes, dozens of them, locked onto mine, cold and calculating. Her mandibles clicked, and for a moment, I thought I saw something in her movements, something eerily human. Was she like me? The thought came unbidden, sending a chill through me. Had Mama Webster once been a player, someone like me who had died in this world and been rewoven into one of Nahma's monstrous creations? The idea made my stomach churn, but there was no time to dwell on it. She reared back, her massive legs pinning me down as she prepared to strike, and then Gregory moved. With a roar, he leapt onto her back, his sword slashing into the thick fur of her thorax. She shrieked, twisting violently, but he held on, his weight throwing her balance off. "Gregory!" Tiana screamed, her voice filled with panic. He didn't hesitate. With a final, desperate movement, he drove his blade deeper and pulled with all his strength, dragging her weight toward the edge of the bridge. Mama Webster screeched, her legs flailing as she scrambled for purchase. The ropes creaked and groaned under her immense weight, but Gregory didn't stop. With one last, tremendous heave, he pulled her over the edge. There was no time for words, no final goodbyes. Gregory and Mama Webster disappeared into the darkness below, their forms swallowed by the abyss. The sound of their fall echoed faintly. Then, silence. I lay there, staring at the edge of the bridge, my chest tight and my breath shallow. Tiana stood frozen, her bow slack in her hands, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Glenn," she said, finally, her voice trembling. "We have to move." I nodded numbly, forcing myself to my feet. We crossed the bridge in silence, the creaking planks beneath my boots a cruel reminder of what had just happened. When we reached the other side, I turned back, staring into the void where Gregory had fallen. I didn't say anything. There were no words, just a hollow, gnawing ache that I knew I'd carry with me for the rest of this journey. We pressed on, because there was nothing else we could do. The days following our retreat from the gorge blurred together, an endless stretch of exhaustion, grief, and grim determination. With no way forward through the gorge and Gregory gone, we had no choice but to loop back to the army and search for another plan. It took weeks to navigate the winding trails and treacherous terrain that led us around the gorge. The terrain seemed to grow more twisted and foreboding with each passing day, as if the land itself conspired to keep us from our goal. The soldiers, now bound to a deeper purpose by the tune of my pipes, marched with a resilience that bordered on eerie. Tiana and I kept to ourselves, our shared grief over Gregory's sacrifice hanging between us like a shadow. The nights were the hardest. The campfires brought little comfort, the flickering flames casting shadows that danced too much like monsters. Every gust of wind, every crack of a branch sent our nerves spiraling. I couldn't shake the feeling that Nahma was watching, her unseen presence weighing heavily on my mind. But we pressed on, because there was no other choice. Eventually, the land began to change again. The jagged cliffs gave way to smoother plains, and the oppressive canopy of the forest thinned, letting in faint streams of light. The air was different here, heavier with a strange, cloying sweetness that clung to every breath. And then, one morning, we saw it. Nahma's palace. It loomed on the horizon like a dark crown, its towering spires piercing the sky. The gates were immense, wrought from black iron and adorned with intricate carvings of writhing figures, their twisted forms both beautiful and grotesque. The walls shimmered faintly, as though they were made of liquid shadow, and the air around the palace seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. The army stopped in their tracks. The soldiers murmured uneasily as they took in the sight. Even Tiana, who had been so composed, seemed shaken by the sheer presence of the palace.
It's massive,
she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my jaw tightening as I stared up at the gates.
This is it,
I said, more to myself than anyone else. The weight of Gregory's absence hit me again as I stood there, his sacrifice fresh in my mind. He had given everything to get us here, and now it was up to us to finish what we'd started. Tiana stepped closer, her expression hardening as she placed a hand on my shoulder.
"You wouldn't want us to stop now,"
she said, as if reading my thoughts. I took a deep breath, the pipes in my hand feeling heavier than ever. "No," I said quietly.
"She wouldn't."
I turned to the soldiers, their eyes fixed on me, waiting for their next command.
"Prepare yourselves,"
I said, my voice steady despite the unease twisting in my gut.
"This isn't just a palace. It's her domain, and she won't let us in without a fight."
The army moved into formation, their discipline unnerving in its precision. Tiana and I exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the battle ahead. As the gates of Nahma's palace loomed closer, the oppressive hum in the air grew louder, resonating deep in my chest. The assault began at dawn. The soldiers moved as one, their polished armor glinting in the faint light of the rising sun. The air was heavy with tension, thick with the unspoken understanding that this battle would be unlike anything we had ever faced. Tiana stood beside me, her bow drawn, her sharp gaze fixed on the towering gates of Nahma's palace. As we approached, the oppressive hum in the air intensified, vibrating deep in my chest. The walls of the palace seemed to shimmer with a dark, liquid energy, their surface alive with faint, writhing shapes that defied understanding. The army reached the gates, and the first wave of soldiers surged forward, carrying a massive battering ram. The crash of wood against iron echoed through the courtyard, each strike reverberating like a thunderclap. Monsters poured out of the shadows. They came in waves, grotesque and twisted, their forms defying logic. Some were massive, towering beasts with limbs that bent unnaturally, their flesh covered in pulsating black veins. Others were smaller, faster, their razor-sharp claws and jagged teeth gleaming in the dim light. The soldiers held their ground, their movements precise and unrelenting as they engaged the horde. For every monster they struck down, two more seemed to take its place. The air was filled with the clash of steel, the guttural roars of the creatures, and the cries of men fighting for their lives. Tiana loosened arrow after arrow, each shot finding its mark. I stayed close, my blade cutting through the chaos as we pushed forward, step by bloody step. And then, with a deafening crack, the gates shattered. The soldiers surged through, spilling into the courtyard beyond. For a moment, it seemed like we had the upper hand. The monsters faltered, their ranks thinning as we pushed them back toward the palace walls. But it was a trap. The walls shimmered, the shadows twisting and stretching until they burst forth with a new wave of horrors. These were different, more deliberate, more calculated, their grotesque forms moving with an intelligence that sent a chill down my spine. The ambush hit the army hard. Soldiers were dragged into the shadows, their screams cutting short as the monsters overwhelmed them. The courtyard became a bloodbath, the once coordinated ranks of my army breaking apart under the relentless assault.
"Keep moving,"
Tiana shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me forward. We fought through the chaos, the pipes heavy at my side as I slashed and ducked, every step closer to the main entry of the palace. The air was suffocating now, thick with the acrid stench of blood and decay. As we neared the massive doors that led into the palace itself, the battle seemed to fade into the background. The noise dulled, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed down on my chest. And then they dropped. 3 figures descended from the walls above, landing with a thunderous crash that shook the ground beneath us. The first was a hulking monstrosity, its body a grotesque blend of muscle and metal, its face twisted into a mockery of humanity. Its eyes gleamed with a cold, unfeeling light, and its movements were deliberate, almost purposeful. Henry. I froze, my mind struggling to reconcile the monstrous form before me with the man I had once known. His features were warped, his body reshaped into something unrecognizable, but there was no mistaking the presence that radiated from him. The second was smaller, its grotesque frame twitching with an unnatural energy. Its skin was pale and sickly, its limbs elongated and ending in razor-sharp claws. Its face was a twisted parody of youth, its mouth stretched into a jagged grin that didn't reach its cold, lifeless eyes. Skeeb. A sickening realization churned in my stomach as I remembered his childish bravado, his insistence on being a warlord. Now he was a nightmare given form, a mockery of the boy he once was. The third monster stepped forward, and my breath caught in my throat. It was massive, its lower body a grotesque, spider-like form that clattered on the stone with a horrifying rhythm. Its upper body was humanoid, but only barely. Its arms were long and segmented, ending in jagged, chitinous blades. Its face... Gregory, I whispered, my voice trembling. The monstrous form before me had his eyes, or at least what was left of them. They glinted with a cruel intelligence, the twisted remains of the man who had sacrificed himself for us, now standing as Nahmar's weapon. Tiana gasped, her bow faltering as she took a step back. "No," she breathed, her voice filled with disbelief. The 3 horrors stood in silence for a moment, their presence suffocating. Then, as one, they moved. Henry charged forward, his massive frame barreling toward us like a living battering ram. Skeeb scuttled along the walls, his claws scraping against the stone with an ear-piercing screech. Gregory circled, his spider legs clattering as he closed in with deliberate malice. "Glenn!" Tiana shouted, snapping me out of my stupor. I raised my blade, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. These weren't just monsters, they were ghosts, twisted remnants of the people I had failed to save. And now, they were coming for me. The fight began with a fury that felt doomed from the start. Henry roared, his massive form charging forward with terrifying speed. Tiana loosened arrow after arrow, each one striking true, but barely slowing him down. I met his charge head-on, my blade crashing against the grotesque, metallic monstrosity of his limbs. Each strike sent vibrations through my arms, the sheer power of his attacks overwhelming. "Glenn, move!" Tiana shouted as Skeeb leapt from the wall, his claws slashing down at me. I barely ducked in time, the air hissing as his claws tore through the space where my head had been. Gregory's spider-like form clattered toward Tiana, his long, segmented legs moving with horrifying precision. She dodged one strike, then another, her movements frantic as she tried to find an opening to shoot. "They're too fast," she yelled, her voice straining. I slashed at Henry, but his thick, grotesque armor absorbed the blow. He swung at me with a fist the size of a boulder, and I barely managed to roll out of the way as the ground where I'd been standing cracked under the impact. Skeeb skittered around me, his movements erratic and unnerving. He lunged, his claws catching the edge of my armor and dragging me off balance. I stumbled, falling to one knee, and felt the cold rush of air as Gregory's bladed arm came down toward me. "Glenn!" Tiana screamed, tackling me out of the way. The blade struck the ground with a deafening clang, sending shards of stone flying. I scrambled to my feet, my chest heaving as I tried to keep up with their relentless assault. My mind raced, searching for any strategy, any hope of turning the tide. But they were faster, stronger, and terrifyingly coordinated. Henry swung his massive arm, and this time it connected. The blow sent me flying, my back slamming into the stone wall of the courtyard. Stars exploded in my vision as pain shot through me, my weapon slipping from my grasp. I blinked, trying to focus, and saw them closing in. Henry advancing with his hulking frame, Skeeb scuttling with twitching anticipation, Gregory towering above them all with an eerie, deliberate grace. Tiana was struggling too, her arrows running low as she dodged and weaved, trying to keep them at bay. It was hopeless. But then, in the chaos, I saw it. A gap between the horrors, a narrow path that led to the palace doors. The thought hit me like a bolt of lightning. If I could just make it inside.
Tiana,
I shouted, pushing myself to my feet.
cover me. What are you? Just do it.
She hesitated for only a second before turning her focus to the monsters. With a shout, she fired an arrow that struck Henry square in the chest, drawing his attention away from me. I ran. My legs felt like lead, every step a battle against the pain coursing through my body. The monsters reacted immediately. Skeeb shrieked, his claws scraping against the stone as he lunged toward me. Gregory shifted, his spider legs clattering as he moved to block my path. But Tiana was there, her arrows flying in rapid succession, each one finding its mark. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it was enough to slow them down. I reached the doors, my breath ragged as I slammed into the massive, ornate surface. They creaked under my weight, but didn't budge.
Come on!
I growled, throwing all my strength into it. Behind me, I heard Tiana cry out, a sharp, desperate sound that made my stomach drop.
Glenn?
She shouted, her voice filled with panic. I glanced over my shoulder and saw her on the ground, her bow broken, Henry towering over her. Gregory was advancing, his bladed arms raised, and Skeeb was already closing the distance to me. Panic surged through me as I turned back to the doors, shoving against them with everything I had. With a groan, they gave way, swinging open just enough for me to slip through. I stumbled inside, the heavy doors slamming shut behind me with a deafening thud. Part 7. The sudden silence was jarring, the oppressive hum of the palace replacing the chaos of the battle outside. My chest heaved as I leaned against the door, my mind racing. Tiana was still out there. The army was still out there. And I was alone. The doors swung behind me with a deep, resonant thud, and the sound echoed endlessly, swallowed by the vastness of the space ahead. The air here was heavy, not just with humidity, but with something intangible, an oppressive presence that clung to my skin and made each breath a labor. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was a silence that felt alive, pressing against my eardrums, filled with the faintest whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The throne room stretched before me, impossibly vast. Pillars rose on either side, each one intricately carved with writhing figures that seemed to shift and twist when I wasn't looking directly at them. The designs were grotesque, yet mesmerizing, faceless forms entwined in a dance that was equal parts ecstasy and agony. Their shapes seemed to move in the flickering light cast by massive chandeliers, their flames burning not with fire, but with a cold, bluish glow. The floor beneath me gleamed, a black, reflective surface like obsidian, yet as I stepped forward, faint ripples spread from my boots as though the ground was a still pool. My reflection stared back at me from below, but it wasn't quite my own. It was subtle at first, but the more I glanced at it, the more I noticed small distortions. My face stretched just slightly too long, my eyes a touch too hollow, my movements a half-second delayed. Far ahead, at the end of this vast and surreal expansion, sat the throne. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. The structure was enormous, towering high enough to touch the vaulted ceiling. Its surface shimmered like molten gold, but it wasn't smooth. It was textured, covered in jagged spikes and flowing organic curves that gave it the appearance of a living thing, frozen mid-motion. The back of the throne split into branches, curling upward like the limbs of a twisted tree, each branch adorned with hanging orbs of light. The orbs pulsed faintly, their illumination revealing shifting images within, faces, places, and fragments of moments that flickered like dying memories. The seat itself was carved from what looked like ivory, yet it was mottled and veined, as though it had been shaped from bone. The armrest extended outward into grotesque sculptures of hands, too many fingers, all bending in unnatural directions, reaching toward the unseen. Above the throne, a massive canopy loomed, crafted from interwoven strands of silver and black thread that caught the pale light in a web of shimmering patterns. The threads moved faintly, like something alive, as though they were breathing in sync with the room itself. The space around the throne pulsed with an unnatural glow, a faint haze that seemed to warp the air. It was beautiful in its horror, a perfect marriage of elegance and grotesquerie, a creation that felt as though it had been pulled from the collective nightmares of humanity and shaped into something undeniably majestic. I took a step closer, and then another. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer weight of the atmosphere pressing down on me. My reflection in the floor twisted more grotesquely the closer I got, its face elongating into a monstrous grin, its eyes black voids dotted with faint, flickering stars. I refused to look down again, focusing instead on the throne, its presence an anchor pulling me forward. The closer I got, the more the whispers grew. They were faint, tantalizing, just on the edge of comprehension. Words I couldn't make out, but somehow felt like a soft touch against the back of my mind. The air shifted, subtly but unmistakably, as though something immense and unseen had turned its attention toward me. I froze mid-step, the weight of that invisible gaze almost too much to bear. It was cold and scorching all at once, probing and dissecting, peeling away the layers of my thoughts and memories like pages from a book. The whispers swirled louder now, converging into a cacophony that sounded almost like a voice, soft and alluring, yet sharp and venomous. Still, I kept moving, step by agonizing step, until the base of the throne loomed near. And then I stopped, the faint haze around the throne crackling faintly as I stared up at its impossible form. The whispers ceased, replaced by a silence that was somehow even more deafening. I stood there, mere steps away from the throne, the oppressive air thick with expectation. And I knew, as surely as I knew anything, that she was waiting for me. As I stepped closer and closer toward the throne, its presence towering over me, the air grew thicker, almost suffocating. The throne itself seemed to shimmer, its twisted, grotesque beauty pulling me forward like an unseen force. And then, as I reached out, my fingers mere inches from its base, I heard it. A soft whisper in my ear, intimate and sudden. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. Slowly, I turned my head, and there she was, Nachma. She stood impulsively close, her body pressed lightly against mine, her arms wrapped around me in an almost loving embrace. Her head rested on my shoulder, her posture casual, almost affectionate, as though she had always been there. Her skin gleamed like polished porcelain, with a faint, ethereal tint of lavender, giving her an otherworldly glow. Her hair spilled over her shoulders like dark silk, framing a face that was both exquisitely beautiful and deeply unsettling. Her eyes, deep pools of endless black, held faint pinpricks of light, like stars scattered across a void. Her presence was intoxicating, warm and welcoming, yet laced with an unmistakable danger. Her grasp felt soothing, her touch disarming, as though she were an old friend or a long-lost lover. She smiled, her lips curling into a teasing, knowing grin. "You've come far, haven't you?" she said, her voice soft and melodic, yet carrying a weight that seemed to reverberate through the room. I tensed, but didn't move, her arms holding me in place. "I assume you've come here to take me up on my offer." Her words were a velvet trap, laced with subtle allure. "I've come to stop you," I said, though my voice sounded weaker than I intended. She laughed softly, the sound both comforting and unnerving. "Oh, Glenn, always so noble,
So determined to play the hero.
Her fingers trailed lightly along my chest as she spoke, her touch sending a shiver through me.
But why fight me when you could join me? You've seen what I offer. Freedom, power, paradise. Why cling to a world that doesn't even care about you?
I gritted my teeth, trying to focus. What you offer isn't real. It's an illusion. She tilted her head, her cheek brushing against mine as she spoke.
And what isn't? Tell me, Glenn. What is real? Is it the misery of the world you came from? The loneliness you carry even now? Or is it the joy you felt in this one? The fortress you built? The life you lived? The connection you found, even if only for a fleeting moment?
Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Maple wasn't real, I said, my voice wavering slightly.
She was real enough for you to care.
Nachma countered smoothly, her tone almost pitying.
She was a reflection of your desires, of your heart. Is that so different from what you seek in your so-called real world? A connection, a purpose, a place to belong.
Her arms tightened slightly, her embrace warm and inviting.
I can give you all of that, Glenn. I can take away the pain, the doubt, the endless struggle. Here, you could have everything you ever wanted. Love, power, peace.
I shook my head, trying to pull away, but her hold was unyielding. Let me go, I said, though my voice lacked conviction.
Why?
She whispered, her breath brushing against my ear.
So you can return to that cold, empty world. To wander aimlessly, chasing mysteries and reporting them to the few who bother to listen. To the ones who don't even believe you.
Her words sank into me like hooks, pulling at the doubts I tried to bury.
Stay,
she murmured, her tone soft and persuasive.
You've already built so much here. Imagine what more you could achieve with me at your side.
I closed my eyes, trying to block out her voice, her touch, her overwhelming presence. But she was everywhere. Her scent, her warmth, her voice.
You deserve this, Glenn,
she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
You've earned it.
Her head tilted slightly, her lips brushing my ear as she added.
Just say yes.
The room felt like it was spinning, her voice pulling me deeper into her web, my hands clenching at my sides, my mind racing as I struggled to hold on to a truth I wasn't even sure of anymore. Was she right? Could she be? And yet, something deep within me whispered a different answer, faint but insistent. I opened my eyes, my breath steadying as I finally spoke. No. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes darkened, the faint stars with them burning brighter for a moment. She leaned back slightly, her embrace loosening, though she didn't let go entirely.
Such resolve,
she said, her tone carrying a hint of mockery.
But how long will it last, I wonder?
Her head tilted, her gaze piercing as she whispered.
You may yet change your mind.
Nachma's arms loosened, her hands sliding gently to my shoulders. With an almost effortless grace, she turned me to face her. Her dark, starlit eyes bored into mine, the faint curve of her smile both alluring and dangerous.
Before you refuse,
she murmured, her voice soft and soothing.
See what it is that you're refusing.
Her hands moved to my face, cradling it gently as if I was something fragile, something cherished. And then she leaned in and kissed me. For a moment, everything else vanished. The weight of the throne room, the echoes of the horrors I'd faced, the doubts gnawing at my mind, they all dissolved in her touch. Her lips were impossibly warm, a sensation electric and intoxicating, spreading through my body like a drug. Thoughts swirled, unbidden and tempting. Why fight this? The idea was a whisper at first, soft and insistent, winding its way through the recesses of my mind. You've suffered enough. You've fought enough. Haven't you earned this? I sank deeper into the kiss, my hands falling limp at my sides. The rational part of me screamed to pull away, but her presence was overwhelming. She was safety. She was comfort. She was everything I'd ever wanted, and for a fleeting moment, I began to justify it. What's the harm in staying? The world I left behind is cold, indifferent. But here, I matter. Here, I can build something beautiful, something lasting. And with her. But then, from somewhere deep within, a small but steady voice broke through the haze. No. The thought was faint at first, barely audible over the pull of her touch, but it grew louder, clearer, until it was all I could hear. No. The warmth that had flooded me shifted, turning sharp and cold. A searing pain pierced my chest, sudden and intense, forcing a gasp from my lips. Nahma pulled away, her dark eyes glittering with something between amusement and disappointment. Her lips curled into that same teasing smile as she looked at me, her head tilted slightly. "Oh well," she said, her tone light, as though she hadn't just plunged a knife into my soul. The world seemed to tilt, the pain in my chest radiating outward as her words lingered in the air, and I staggered, unsteady beneath her gaze. Everything suddenly became louder, deafeningly loud. The world itself seemed to screech like a banshee, a cacophony of sirens screaming in my head, drowning out every thought. Pain erupted, sharp and overwhelming, as if my very existence was being unmade. My hand moved instinctively to the dagger buried in my chest, its cold, biting presence radiating outward, each pulse sending icy tendrils through my body. My vision blurred, then shifted entirely. The world around me began to fall away, the rich textures and the haunting beauty of the throne room dissolving into something stark and alien. Wireframes emerged from the void, the structure of the space reduced to a skeletal grid of glowing red ones and zeros, pulsating faintly as though alive. Every surface, every detail was stripped down to its raw, digital essence, the framework of the world exposed for what it truly was. As I staggered, Nahma shifted too, her form expanding and growing, impossibly massive. She loomed over me, her porcelain skin now shimmering with the same red glow, her dark eyes burning like black holes pulling everything into their endless depths. Her voice came, and it was no longer melodic. It was omnipresent, vibrating through the very air, shaking the fragile wire frame of reality. "Oh, Glenn," she cooed, her tone dripping with mockery, magnified to an unbearable scale. "What am I going to make you into?" I gasped, trying to speak, trying to move, but the pain in my chest pinned me in place. My body felt weightless, as though I was being unraveled, the ones and zeros that made up this world spilling out of me. "I know," Nahma continued, her lips curling into a cruel smile. She raised one porcelain hand, gesturing toward me as a new form began to take shape beside her. A wireframe figure grew from the ground, its shape unmistakable. A chess piece. "A king," she said, her voice turning dark and playful. "I don't see you breaking out of that. A perfect little king, stuck in my game." The wireframe king solidified, its skeletal lines filling in with ones and zeros pouring from my body. I could feel it, the pieces of myself being drained and reshaped, the intangible threads of my soul unraveled and stitched into her creation. I watched helplessly as the piece became whole, its surface gleaming with an eerie sheen of polished black and crimson. The sight of it twisted something deep inside me, a primal terror unlike anything I'd ever felt before. My knees buckled, the weight of it all dragging me down.
I collapsed, my hands trembling as they pressed against the cold, barren grate beneath me. Above, Nahma loomed, impossibly large and impossibly powerful, her laughter echoing through the hollow void. The last fragments of the world as I knew it slipped away, replaced by the stark, unrelenting glow of the ones and zeros. "I can't believe it," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a thunderclap. "Oh, believe it," Nahma mocked, her voice dripping with smug amusement, her towering form radiating unshakable power. But that was it. Belief. Her words, her presence, the very nature of this world, all of it revolved around belief. If she could control us outright, she wouldn't need these intricate illusions or elaborate manipulations. It was always about belief. Her power came from what we believed, what we accepted. And that meant I could fight her. My hand moved instinctively to my side where the pipes rested. They were the one thing I truly believed in, the one tool that had always felt undeniably real. If I could believe in myself, make her believe in me, then her belief in her own invincibility would falter. I gripped the pipes tightly, the familiar weight of them grounding me. Slowly, I rose to my feet, the sharp pain in my chest receding as I stood. The ones and zeros pouring out of me reversed, flowing back into my body in a sudden, violent surge. The wireframe king beside her shattered into fragments, the glowing pieces spiraling back into me like a flood of strength. Nahma's smug expression faltered, her eyes narrowing in shock and disbelief. "What?" she hissed, her voice no longer mocking. I brought the pipes to my lips and began to play. The notes came out strong, deliberate, and focused. They weren't random. They were emotions. Doubt, dismay, uncertainty, each note reverberating through the wireframe world, twisting and warping the ones and zeros that surrounded us. Nahma staggered, her towering form flickering like a glitch in the code. "No," she spat, her voice cracking with something I hadn't heard before. Fear. I forced every ounce of my belief into the melody, channeling it through the pipes. I believed in myself. I believed in my strength. And with every note, her belief in herself, in this world, began to crumble. Her form shrank as the wires and chains of the world, her world, lashed out. They wrapped around her, glowing with a vibrant green energy, binding her arms and legs, pulling her closer to the ground. "No!" she screamed, her voice growing smaller as the chains tightened. "This is my world. You can't." But I could. Her massive form diminished, folding in on itself as the wires constricted. She shrunk further and further, her struggles growing weaker with each passing moment. I kept playing, the melody relentless, forcing her to confront the unraveling of her own belief. Her faith in her invincibility was gone, replaced by the simple, undeniable truth. I could do this. The wires pulled her down, her form twisting and shrinking until all that was left was a small, gleaming chess piece. A queen. I lowered the pipes, my breathing heavy as I stared at the piece sitting on the wireframe floor. Its once vibrant red glow had faded, replaced by a calm, steady green. The room around me shifted, the oppressive hum replaced by a quiet stillness. The ones and zeros that had once threatened to consume me now pulsed gently, their glow soft and reassuring. I stepped forward, my hand trembling slightly as I reached down to pick up the queen. It felt cold, but not hostile, just a fragment of what she had once been. For the first time since I entered this nightmare, the world felt still. I slipped the queen into my pocket, its cold surface pressing against me as a tangible reminder of what had just happened. For a moment, I stood still, the quiet of the wireframe world settling around me like a fragile peace. Then, I brought the pipes to my lips once more. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, but it carried the weight of something pure, something real, a song of freedom.
The melody began sweet and gentle, like the first rays of sunlight after a storm, but as I played, it swelled, growing richer and more vibrant. The notes seemed to reach into the very fabric of this world, unraveling the oppressive threads Nahma had woven into it. The changes began slowly. The flickering ones and zeros around me faded, replaced by a warm, golden glow. The ground beneath my feet rippled as the wire frame dissolved into something brighter, more natural. Then I saw them. The monsters. All the grotesque, horrifying creatures Nahma had created began to shift. Their forms wavered, their twisted shapes unraveling as if shedding a cruel, unwanted skin. And beneath the horror, I saw them. Players. Souls. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. People who had been trapped here for far too long, their identities warped and buried beneath Nahma's will. They stood motionless for a moment, their eyes wide with disbelief, as though they were waking from an endless nightmare. One by one, they began to fade, their forms breaking apart into shimmering light. The golden fragments rose upward, carried by an unseen current, drifting toward a brilliant white light that had appeared in the sky. I stopped playing for a moment, lowering the pipes as I stared upward. The light wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, inviting, a radiant tear in this digital world that beckoned every soul toward it. There were no words, no time for them. But as I looked around, I saw familiar faces. Tiana, her sharp eyes soft with gratitude. Gregory, his expression calm and resolute, the torment of his monstrous form wiped clean. Henry stood beside us, his gaze steady and proud. And even Skeeb, a faint grin tugging at his lips, nodded toward me in acknowledgement. They didn't speak, but they didn't have to. The gratitude in their eyes said everything. The last of them faded, their light joining the stream of souls ascending into the sky. The world around me was crumbling now, the digital threads falling away, unraveling into nothingness. I looked down at the pipes in my hands, their familiar weight grounding me one final time. Then, I felt it. The pull. The golden glow surrounded me, my body fading piece by piece, dissolving into the light. The pipes slipped from my fingers, falling to the ground as they too began to fade. I didn't fight it. The last thing I saw was the light, pure and all-encompassing, before I too was carried upward, leaving behind the world that had held me captive for so long. And then there was nothing but freedom. I awoke in my bed. For a long moment, I didn't move. The soft sheets beneath me, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the low glow of my desk lamp. It was all so familiar, but after everything I'd been through, it felt impossibly distant. I sat up slowly, my body heavy with exhaustion. My eyes drifted to the faint flicker of my computer screen across the room. It displayed a soft, flickering error message. Error 404. Page not found. The URL still lingered at the top of the browser. WireWeave. The sight of it sent a shiver through me. But when I glanced down at the corner of the screen, I froze. The date. It had been a single day. One day. But in Nahma's world, I had lived months. I exhaled slowly, my chest tightening as I processed the impossible truth. It wasn't just that I was home. It was that home hadn't even noticed I was gone. My hand ached, stiff and clenched tightly, as if it had been gripping something for hours. Slowly, I opened my fingers. There, nestled in my palm, was a chess piece. The Queen. It was obsidian black, its surface gleaming faintly in the dim light, cool to the touch. unnaturally smooth and somehow heavier than it should have been. I stared at it, my breath catching as a certainty settled over me. One I couldn't explain but felt deep in my core. It was Nahma. She had been bound, reshaped by the very wires and chains she used to subjugate others, her essence now trapped within this fragile, beautiful piece. I rose from the bed, my legs unsteady, and walked to the shelf on the far wall. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of my breathing, each step feeling deliberate and final. Carefully, I set the queen on the shelf, its dark surface gleaming faintly in the warm light of the lamp nearby. It stood there, small and unassuming, yet radiating the weight of everything I had endured. I stared at it for a long moment, then spoke aloud, my voice calm and resolute. "You're in my world now, Nahma." I smirked faintly, the words carrying a finality that even she couldn't deny. "Believe that." And with that, I turned away, leaving her there, silent, powerless, done. So what did I learn? That my desires were just that. Desires. They didn't define me, they didn't own me, and they certainly didn't dictate what I could or couldn't be. I already knew the world was stranger than most would assume. That wasn't new, but I learned something deeper, something I think humanity always knew, but forgot. We can overcome evil. We can seal away demons. We don't need to give in to them. And maybe the most important thing I learned was this. Life is what you make it. It's messy, imperfect, and full of uncertainty. But it's also beautiful, fleeting, and worth fighting for. Sitting there in my apartment, the queen silently perched on the shelf behind me. I thought about all the things I'd ignored, the chances I'd let slip by, desires I'd buried beneath fear, hesitation, or pride. I picked up my phone and stared at it for a moment before opening my messages. There she was, the girl I could have had something with once, but never tried hard enough for. The one I'd pushed aside, thinking there'd always be time. But now I knew time wasn't a promise, and being alone wasn't what I wanted anymore. I sent her a message, just something simple, reaching out, asking if she wanted to meet. It didn't take long for her to reply. She happily agreed. I smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and set the phone down. As for the others, I wondered where they'd gone. Tiana, Gregory, even Henry and Skeeb, they'd been more than companions. They'd been anchors in a storm, pulling me through when I thought I'd sink. But I had no way to find them now. And to be honest, I didn't truly have the desire to. They had their lives, whatever those may be now, and I wished them the best in theirs. I turned back to my desk, catching a glimpse of the queen on the shelf. She seemed so small now, so insignificant, and yet she was a reminder of everything I'd endured. I don't plan on stopping my investigations. The mysteries of the world still call to me, still pull me forward, and I won't ignore them. But now, I plan on living my life, too. Because life isn't just about what you uncover, it's about what you make of it. And I'm ready to start making mine something worth living for. Until next time.
Hey everybody. Okay, ending thoughts. This was fantastic, man. I don't think I've done an isekai-esque story in a long time. Also, Skeeb, I think, was a fun villain. Fantastic, beautiful creature design, both from just the descriptions as well as the fantastic sound effects that you heard from Weekly Creeps. He did a great fucking job.
Thank you so much to Simply as well for his thumbnail creation and the big fucking mama spider in the front and center for this one. Yeah, I hope that y'all enjoyed this. I know I did. It was a very fun little piece. And here's to another story, guys. See y'all later. Bye-bye.